There is an animal that lives in the wilderness that's extremely misunderstood, and everybody talks bad about them. We are not saying they're good or bad, but there are a lot of negative things that's said about this animal. That animal is this, a hyena. Some people call this animal a coward, some call it a rat, some call it an a-hole, and some even call it evil. The description we just told you is pretty similar throughout the world, and because of that, you could ask anybody about this animal and they probably know about it. Another reason people don't like this animal is that it's one of the biggest enemies to the most beautiful animal in nature, and that's the lion. Throughout the world, anywhere you find lions, you could find hyenas, and they're mostly in Africa and Asia. It is true that hyenas don't have the power strength of tigers and lions, but they are a predator, especially when they work in groups. Just like every animal on Earth, based on their location, these hyenas look different. In the southern part of Africa, hyenas have a completely brown fur, and the more you start moving up north, the more spotted these hyenas become. These spots continue up north to northern Africa, and then it moves east towards Asia. It goes throughout the Middle East, and it even reaches north as Siberia. The more you move up north, the spots on these animals become stripes, and some of them have extra fur on top. In a lot of places, this is a unique animal. And one of the main things is that you can find it in all types of weather throughout the world. It could be a desert, it could be a jungle, mountainous area, it could be completely frozen, hot like the Arabian desert. You could find this thing, and that makes it completely unique because it survives in all types of weather. You might find this interesting, but hyenas come from the cat family, the same family tigers and lions come from. But when you look at it at first glance, it looks more similar to dogs rather than cats. Just like other cats in the wild, its average lifespan is about 12 years, but in captivity, they could live as high as 25 years. One of hyena's main weapons is its speed, because it could run as fast as 60 kilometers an hour. A lot of people think that hyenas eat the leftover food that other predators left around, but it's not like that. These guys hunt for themselves, but if they see a lion that has hunted something down and their population is not too many, they will attack the lion and try to steal the food. But if there is a lot of lions, they will not dare attack them. It's not easy for hyenas to kill predators like lions. They slowly keep annoying it from the back, and the lion cannot do anything about it. Hyenas are not afraid of giant animals either. If they're very hungry, they'll even hunt buffaloes. They don't even care, they'll fight giraffes as well. Hyenas are great mothers to their cub, and unlike other wild animals, they will put their self on the line for their cubs to survive. A hyena is only pregnant for 110 days, but in this very short period of time, when the cub is born, it's ready to live. Its eyes can see perfectly, it has a full set of teeth, it could walk, and it could reasonably protect itself. In this case, it's very different from other cats, because when a kitty is born, it's pretty much blind and it can't see. It has to keep growing for it to get some power. When you look at hyenas and see how they sound like and the screams, you think that these are not smart animals. But it's not like that, because in their own little club, they're actually one of the smartest ones. Some scientists even say that hyenas are the smartest cat family because you can compare its IQ to chimpanzees. The cool thing is, they even have problem-solving skills. As you know, animals like this have a leader, and that's called the alpha. You could find alphas in lions, wolves, you could even find them in dogs. Alpha basically means a leader to the whole clan, and everyone in that group has to respect them. Alphas are usually smarter than the other ones, and if there's gonna be a war between two groups, the alphas will count the other group's amount of hyena, and based on that knowledge, if there's more than them, they will call off the war. In a hyena, an alpha is always a female. A male will never be the alpha. A female hyena has so much power that the males don't dare challenge them. When you look at hyenas, it's hard to determine their genders because their genitals are very similar in shape, and when you look at them, you think they're all males, but that's not the case. Unlike other mammals, the female hyena is way stronger and bigger than the male hyena, and this is the main reason you will never find a male alpha. A hyena cub is fully grown by the age of 7, especially their jaw, and at 7 years old it has the maximum strength it could have, and you could say they're at their prime at that age. Another thing that caused the hyena to be found everywhere and be able to live in all types of weather is that they're conquerors, and they try to conquer more land and keep moving forward, and that is why you could find them all throughout Africa and Asia. You could say if there were no humans, you could find hyenas in every place of the world. Just like we said, the females are the leaders. Up next in the class are the cub, and at the bottom of the jar it's the males. If there's food, first the females eat. When they're full, the cubs come and eat. And if there's anything left, the males will come and eat it. But unfortunately, if there's nothing, they have to suffer. If a male is not happy with his life and wants to complain to the female alpha, they will have a fight. And if they continue, they might get killed. When other cats make noises, they have some badass voices. Even a cat is respectable for its size. But hyenas like to scream. When you hear it from afar, you feel like a monkey is laughing at you, but they growl as well, but mostly they're screaming. This screaming is not laughing, it's actually a sign of stress, because they scream like this when they're in a stressful situation, like hunting a lion. When they growl, they're usually trying to call the other people in their clan, and that's kind of similar to wolves when they howl to call their homies. In a pack of hyenas, the males cannot choose anything they want, even who they want to mate with. The female will choose the male for mating, and if the male wants or doesn't want, they have to go with it. If they say no, there will be consequences. A hyena only likes to eat meat, so any animal that has meat, they're in danger, because the hyena wants to hunt it and eat it. If they're extremely hungry, an alpha might take the chance and fight something as huge as an elephant, but this is very rare, and that's at a point where they can't find anything else. The reason they don't want to fight elephants is that the risk is way too high, and some people might get killed. When they catch something to eat, they eat the meat first, and there's bones left, and the males are usually eating the leftover bones. They have a very cool system because they can digest bones. Sometimes the female fight over the meat, which doesn't go pretty, and none of the males dare to step in to break it up. Another interesting fact is that its digestive system is extremely powerful because it can easily eat rotten food and digest it with no problem, no throwing up or diarrhea. When they get hungry, they will eat any rotten meat they find around because other animals ate it and left it, and no other animals can eat it, so the hyenas will take care of it. Scientists say the hyena's immune system is so strong that nothing like this could damage it. Anything rotten or molded will not do anything to their body. Even rabies can't affect hyenas. If you've seen Lion King, you'll note that the hyenas are the biggest enemies to the lions, and this is straight up facts. In real life, these two hate each other, and sometimes lions like to kill hyenas just for the fun of it, not to eat them. But the hyenas don't really want to attack lions unless there is a single one and they're in a group. If there is a single lion, the chances of them attacking is much higher, but if one turns into two, the attack is called off immediately because they know 2 lions could mess up a big group of hyenas. A lot of people say hyenas are the ugliest animal, but I don't know if I agree. They're not beautiful, but they're not that ugly either. What do you guys think? Just like we said, the male hyenas usually eat the bones because they have strong jaws and they could easily digest it, and that makes their feces look really weird because it's completely white. In the areas hyenas like to live, if there's humans, they like to hunt them because they believe that hyenas will kill their cows, sheep, or other animals they have. And that is why if they are living anywhere near humans, they're usually shot dead. But even with that, their population is not even close to extinction. When a female hyena is pregnant, 1 to 3 cubs could be born. And even though 1 to 3 cubs is not that much, their population is not getting close to extinction. And the main reason is that they're actually not that dumb, and they're one of the smartest cats. They sense danger, they run fast, and they like to live somewhere where they're not bothered. In the year 2006, a Canadian hunter was near the North Pole and he was walking along a frozen lake. But all of a sudden, he sees a polar bear approaching him. He shoots and kills the bear. At first, he thought he shot a polar bear, but once he got up and close and looked at it, he noticed that he shot the weirdest bear he's ever seen. It looked exactly like a bear, but nothing he had seen before. At first, he said it looks like a grizzly and polar bear had a baby. And news about shooting a bear that looked like this passed around Canada quickly, and experts all around the world wanted to check it out to see what kind of animal it is, and that is why they took the dead body from him. At first, they immediately realized that this is a hybrid bear, and just like the hunter, they predicted is a polar grizzly hybrid. With DNA tests, they realized that the mother was a polar bear and the father was a grizzly bear. They realized that they have found a new breed of bear and they named it. So they named it Pizzly, which comes from polar bear and grizzly bear. After this incident, experts tried to look for more Pizzlies, especially in the North Pole. To this day, they've only found 8 natural-born Pizzlies. Remember, we said naturally born, because in different zoos, they have done this before, and that's not natural. Either way, another hybrid animal entered the animal kingdom. But this wasn't the first time a hybrid was found in the wild. In the year 1990, experts found a skull that belonged to a whale they had never seen before, and it has nothing to do with other whales. They did a lot of research to figure out why this skull looks like this and where it came from. After extensive research, they realized that this is a hybrid whale that came from a beluga and a narwhal. Hybrid animals in nature aren't a new thing. They have been happening for millions of years. But after humans came along, they started editing them to the way they like. Like a mule is a hybrid animal that comes from a donkey and horse. It seems like hybrid animals aren't that useful because they can't mate anymore. And at first sight, you think that scientists would not be interested in them. But we are completely wrong. Until now, we know that animals that are very similar to each other can mate with each other and have babies, like 2 different bears, or lions and tigers, and obviously donkeys and horses. Something that doesn't allow like a monkey and a squirrel to have babies is that the egg will not accept the sperm, and that's vice versa, and that is why you will never see a hybrid that came out of a squirrel and a monkey. When 2 creatures mate with each other, a set of chromosomes comes from the mother and a same set comes from the father. The human has 26 chromosomes and 23 comes from the mother and the other 23 comes from the father. So how does horses and donkeys work? Horses have 64 chromosomes, but donkeys have 62 chromosomes, and that is why when the mule is being formed, 32 comes from the horse, but they can't get the equal amount from the donkey, and that is why he gets one less chromosome from the donkey side, and he turns into a mule. And one of the reasons a mule cannot mate and have babies is that it doesn't have an equal amount of chromosomes. But scientists aren't gonna let this go that easily, and they want to figure out how a hybrid can for sure mate. Scientists believe that donkeys and horses were separated about 4 million years ago, and that is the reason they don't have the same amount of chromosomes. But on the other hand, when you compare a brown bear and a polar bear, it seems like they haven't been separated for that long, and they have the same exact amount of chromosomes. So when a polar bear and a grizzly bear have a baby, that pizzly can mate and have babies. The beluga and narwhal have the same amount of chromosomes as well, but they haven't been able to find a hybrid between them. They have found an older skull of that animal, and unfortunately, they aren't able to make this hybrid in a farm. Brown bears and polar bears have recently separated from one another, and scientists believe it's been 150,000 years, and that is the reason their chromosome is the same. Climate change is causing the ices to melt in the North and South Pole, and unfortunately, these animals like to live on ice. So when the ice starts melting, they're basically losing their home because they don't want to live in the water, and that is the reason they start to move more south, somewhere like north of Canada. This might be the reason that the grizzly found a polar bear and mated with it naturally, and in the year 2006, they actually found one. Scientists believe that two animals that are similar to each other mating is not only good for them, but it's extremely good for their future. It could make them better in every way possible. Like for example, a grizzly bear's life is much easier than a polar bear's life. And the reason is the polar bear only likes meat, and life is hard because they can't always find meat. But since the grizzly bear can eat pretty much anything, the grizzly has that advantage over the polar, so life is much easier. It could eat leaves, green, berries, different fruits, and obviously all types of meats like fish. The grizzly bear is extremely powerful and wild, but compared to the polar bear, it lacks power. It's good to know that polar bears are the most powerful carnivores in the world, and they're also the wildest. So this makes the grizzly an extremely strong predator all around. We have to calculate it like this: all the positives that a polar bear has, and all the positives the grizzly bear has, the grizzly gets. Scientists believe that in the future, grizzlies will be the king of the bears because in every way possible, they have an advantage. A grizzly bear does not want to live in a place like this, and even if it is, it tries not to live there. But grizzly, just like the polar bear, loves the cold weather and cold water. We could say the grizzly likes the extremely cold temperatures and the places the grizzly bear likes to live. If you've seen our video about genetic mutations, you have to know because of this, new life forms can be created, and you could find this mostly in ocean creatures. Hybrids don't change because of genetic mutation, but they are created because of two different types of animals mated. In nature, something like this could create something new, the same exact path the grizzly took. The grizzly could be a brand new animal in the animal kingdom. But let's take a look at ourselves for a second. Any human being on Earth that you DNA test, you could find a little bit of Neanderthal in them. Neanderthals are similar to humans, and back in the day, they used to mate with Homo sapiens, and that is why their genes is inside every human. They predict that around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals went extinct, but some scientists say since Homo sapiens were a hybrid animal, they were stronger. If we weren't stronger, we would have ended up like the Neanderthals. So now we realize that genetic mutations actually causes creatures to have a better life in the future, and it helps evolution as well. More powerful animals, smarter, and stronger immune system. When we think about a predator, we think of everything but a jackal. The most famous predator canine is the wolf, and nobody really thinks about the jackal. But not only are jackals very smart, they're also strategic as well. And what we mean by that is that they're very opportunistic. So they don't do anything without thinking about it first. First, let's see where we can find these guys. Just like hyenas, most jackals are in Africa, but you could find jackals in Asia and Europe, and hyenas are nowhere near Europe. There are 3 different types of jackals. The first one is the black-backed jackal, and just like its name, it has a black back. You can only find this type of jackal in these areas of Africa. If you look at the location these black-backed jackals live, it's pretty weird because it's in 2 different locations in the same continent. The reason for that is, between these lines, the weather is very brutal for these jackals, and that is why they naturally separated themselves. Even though back in the day they were together, but the weather caused them to separate in 2 different areas. The second type of jackal you can find in the wild is called the side-striped jackal. And you can find them in these areas of Africa. The places you couldn't find the black-backed jackal, you could find these guys. Unlike the first jackal we showed you, these guys are tougher and they could survive in brutal weather, even swamps. The third type of jackal you can find in the wild is called the golden jackal. You can find this type of jackal in a much greater area, which stretches all the way from East Asia to Europe. If you look at this map, you can tell that this jackal can survive in all types of weather, from deserts to mountainous areas, to freezing areas, to forests. You could tell that these guys are very tough because they can survive in all types of climate. Just like we said, these guys are canines and they're very similar to dogs. They're very similar to foxes as well, and that is the reason most of the time people mistake jackals for fox. The fox is much more well known around the world, so they always mistake it. If it's at night, you might even mistake them for dogs. Even though it's called the golden jackal, it looks more red than gold. Unlike wolves, which are different sizes depending on what type of climate they live in, all 3 types of jackals are very similar in size. You could compare it to the size of a German Shepherd dog. But the jackals are much skinnier because the jackal has to work a lot harder to get the food, so their average weight is between 10 to 14 kilos. As you know, wolves like to live in packs. And if you see a lone wolf, it's extremely weird. And probably his homies are hiding behind a tree to attack you. But a jackal usually lives alone or lives as a duo. And the duo does not have to be its mate, it could be its friend. They also live in packs, but it's much more rare to see them in that way. Jackal is more different than other canines in a sense that when they find a mate, they stay with them for life. If you've never heard a jackal before, this is how they sound like. Between the 3 types of jackals, the black-backed jackal that live here are the most vocal, and if you live near them, you will be very annoyed. Experts believe the reason they're always howling is that to scare other predators away, especially lions and leopards. If we look at the history of canines, we'll see that the black-backed jackal is the oldest canine in history, at least from the fossils that have been found. This is the order of canines that came into nature, which starts from the black-backed jackal. Then we have the side-striped jackal. Then we have another row, which has the African wild dog in there. Up next, we got the dhole or Asian wild dogs. The next tier is the Ethiopian wolf, golden jackal, then we have the golden wolf. Then some canines went from Russia all the way to Alaska to North America and created another tier called the coyote. Then after all that, the gray wolf comes into action. And the last canine that came into nature because of humans is dogs. Just like we said, you can sometimes find jackals that live in groups, but they will never hunt in groups. They either hunt alone or as a duo. Just like other predators, a jackal is extremely quick, and when it runs in full speed, it could speed up to 65 kilometers an hour. This is an extremely fast speed, but it can't do it for a long time. And it's good to know they use this speed to run away, not to hunt or go somewhere else. In our video about hyenas, we said that they are predators, but jackals are not scared of these guys. Jackals, on the other hand, are much more strategic than hyenas, and if they see a pack of hyenas that have hunted something and are eating it, the jackals like to hang around the kill, and they keep trying to steal some of the food. The hyenas don't like it and try to push them away. The jackal is too smart to pick a fight with hyenas, and that is why it tries to be quick and steal some food. But if the hyenas attack, it will run away quick. Since it's hard for jackal to actually hunt meat, they can eat a lot of different things like brown bear. And this goes from berries, different fruits, greens, vegetables. They eat rats, and they could even eat snakes. Another interesting fact about jackals is that when they find a mate, they stay with each other for life. They're pregnant for about 2.5 months, and they could have 2 to 4 puppies. When the mother gives birth, they have to protect them very heavily because they are blind for about 2 weeks. And this is unlike the hyena cub, where it's ready to fight when it's out of the womb. But a jackal puppy has to be taken care of for 2 weeks for it to even start walking. If there's a shortage of food, the male and female have to hide the kids away and go hunting as a duo to find food for them. After a jackal is born, they will stay with their parents until they're 1 year old. But after 1 year old, they have to go start their own family. Jackal puppies, just like dogs, are very playful, and since the day their eyes open, their mother has to watch them extremely carefully because their playfulness can easily get them killed. The biggest enemy to a jackal is an eagle. They could camp in the sky for hours and watch the puppy, and as soon as the mother takes his eyes off the kid, they hunt down. If a jackal's mother is killed, if they're under 6 months, you could say they're not gonna survive. But if they're over 6 months old, they could hunt and survive. But when the parents are present, they don't even let the over 6 months child to go hunting because they can take care of them until they're 1 year old. Just like other canines, jackals will live from 10 to 12 years. Even though jackals take care of their kid, and you could say they spoil their kids, but after they're 1 year old, they have to leave and find their own mate and hunt for themselves. Another good thing you should know is that you could tame a jackal, but not as good as a dog. If you have it since it's a puppy, it's gonna be much more friendly than a wolf. Another reason that you can't tame a wolf is that they're very proud and they usually don't like to listen to someone telling them what to do. But a jackal is very similar to dogs. They are playful and they will listen to you. But the bad thing is, when you tame a jackal, they're only good with you. And if there's a stranger along the way, they will be scared and nervous and they might attack. If you've seen our video about hybrid animals, you'll know that two different animals could mate with each other if they have similar chromosomes. So can a jackal and a dog mate in nature? Yes, they can easily do that. If you look at this list, you could say pretty much all these guys can mate with each other. Mating between dogs and jackals happens a lot between stray dogs and jackals in the wild, especially in Asia and Europe, where the stray dogs are very common. Something that shows the jackal's intelligence is that if it sees a lion chilling and on the other side there's some prey for the lion, it tries to piss off the lion for it to follow it. First, it starts to piss off the lion, and then it runs towards the prey, like for example a zebra. When the lion sees the zebra chilling, it hunts it down, eats it, and there is a lot of food left over for the jackal. Unlike other predators, a jackal is usually to hunt something down 24 hours a day. Even when it's sleeping, it's ready to fight and it's scanning all around itself all the time. So you could say even when it's full, it's always trying to find food for itself. They basically tell themselves, I'm not hungry now, but I will be later. Another interesting fact is that when you look at lions, leopards, and hyenas, however hungry they are, if they see a jackal, they don't want to fight it and hunt it down because they know hunting this thing down is gonna be difficult and they don't want to waste their energy on it. And that is why the jackal is usually not scared of them. One of the biggest enemies to the jackal is an eagle that only attacks the puppies. Oops, I made a mistake. The biggest enemy to the jackal are humans, especially farmers, because the jackal can mess up their produce, eat their animals, and basically cause destruction. Even though a lot of humans and even eagles kill these animals, but fortunately, they are not in danger. And you could say one of the most important things that keeps this animal alive is its intelligence. They keep their puppy alive for 1 year before leaving them, and they hunt strategically. But living in the wild looks difficult because they have to risk their life every day for a piece of meat. It is true that they could live from 10 to 12 years old, but their medium age is about 7 years old. Because when they get old, they can't do anything about it anymore. You could say when they get old, they get a lot weaker and they could get hunted down much easier at that point. Just like other canines, wolves in the wild don't get old either, and most of the time they will die before they're 7 years old. But between all the canines, one of them were the smartest and separated itself from all the wild animals, and that's this animal, dogs. It got itself close to humans. It's the most loyal animal in the world, and that is why most of its problem is solved. But that doesn't include stray dogs, because they have the same problems as a wild dog. There is a family in the animal kingdom that is called the Artiodactyla, and there are more than 270 different animals under this family branch. And it's good to know some of these live in the waters, like orcas and dolphins. And that's the coolest part about this, that orcas and dolphins are under this family. We have animals like giraffes, buffaloes, boars, and what the video is about today, camels. You could say all these animals started from one branch, and depending on the environment and place they lived, they went through evolution differently. Artiodactyla, a family of animals, started around 53 million years ago. And it's nearly the same for camels, about 50 million years ago. The oldest fossil of a camel has been found in South Dakota. It looks something like this, and it lived in North America. About 35 million years ago, These camels start to head west into Asia, and some of them went south to South America. The ones that went to South America evolved like this: a camel that's called a llama, and it's only found in South America, and it's much smaller than a normal camel. The ones that came towards Asia preferred hotter weather, so south of Asia, and they turned into these three different types. The first kind is the Bactrian camel, found around Central Asia. Then the next one, we have the Arabian camel that's found in the Middle East and North Africa, and they're also found in Australia. And you might ask, how is that possible? Just like goats, sheep, and rabbits, the British took camels to Australia in the 1840s. But these camels in Australia aren't as bad as the goats and rabbits in Australia. And they have one of the highest population of camels in any country. The problem the camels were causing in Australia was the huge population, because it went as high as 600,000 camels, and in a span of 4 years, the government killed 300,000 of these camels, and the plan was to keep the population of these animals around 300,000. It's good to know that Saudi Arabia and UAE are the biggest importers of Australian camels, and that's mainly for meat usage and milk. Australia sells camel meat and milk, but UAE and Saudi Arabia prefer to do it themselves. But let's go to the third type of camel. It's a very rare camel, and it's only found in Mongolia and China, and it's considered wild. Let's talk about the Arabian camel, where most of it is found in Australia. An interesting fact about this animal is that it has a very long lifespan as a mammal, and it could live from 40 to 50 years. Camels are very tall as well, and depending on its genes, it could be as high as 1.8 meters all the way to 2 meters and 20 centimeters. But sometimes you have extremely tall camels, and it could go as high as 2.5 meters. But just like humans, this is extremely rare. A camel can weigh from 300 kilos all the way to 1 ton, but the ones that could reach 1 ton are the male Bactrian camels. When you look at a camel, it's usually walking very slowly, but you can't underestimate its power. If it wants to run, it will run, and it can run as fast as 65 kilometers an hour. And for an animal this size and it weighs this much, it's insane. But it can't run at this speed for long. And in the races that happens in Qatar and the UAE, an average speed of a camel throughout the race is about 40 kilometers an hour. A lot of people believe that in a camel hump there is water, and it could walk through the desert and use the water. But in these humps there is no water, and it's made from fat. The way the fat evolved, it was basically like an insulation for the camel's body, and it will keep the body cool against heat. Not only does the fat keep the camel cool, but even if it's hungry and it doesn't find any food, it could give the animal itself energy. It's a beautiful animal, isn't it? In English, we call it a camel, and some say this word came from the Arabic word jamil, which means beautiful. These animals have a giant water tank on them at all times, and it could store a lot of water inside its body, and if it needs it, it will use it inside. It's interesting that when a camel sees a body of water, it could fill its body up all the way to 150 liters, and this allows it to go a long distance in the dry heat. The most interesting thing is that the water is stored in its stomach and it does not go into the humps. Camels are very likable animals, but Arabic countries, especially the Arabian Peninsula, camels are known as the best animal on earth. That is why in Arabic, you can find 160 different words that describes camels. Just like dogs, camels are very social, and they like to live together rather than alone. When you look at inside the camel's mouth, it looks like a nightmare, but that's protection of its mouth, and this allows it to eat a lot of sharp objects, especially dry wheat, without damaging its mouth. It could even eat cacti without damaging its mouth, and it really enjoys it. Humans do some interesting things around the world. Like for example, in Turkey, they like to make these animals wrestle with one another. If you pay attention to the way a camel chews, it's very unique, and this is the only animal that chews like this. The way the camel chews breaks down all the dry wheats in a desert without causing its stomach harm. And if it's not broken down properly, the camel can throw up the food and chew it more than eat it again. It's good to know that cows do the same thing with their food. Camels can survive the longest without water out of any animal. In Arabian countries, the people love camel meat, and they believe it's a very delicious meat, especially the humps. This animal has a very interesting nose as well. If it gets stuck in a sandstorm, it could close its nose like a one-way valve, where it allows it to breathe but won't let the sand in. Another cool thing this animal has is a 3-eyelid eye. These 3 eyelids allows the animal to go through a sandstorm with no problem. If it's going through a sandstorm, it could close one of the layers of its eyes and still see through the clear layer. This is in a way where its cousin, the llama in South America, has 3 eyelids, but their nose cannot be opened and closed. This is where we can see evolution, because the llamas in South America didn't need it to survive in a sandstorm, but this type of camel needed it to survive in this weather. Camels are very emotional, and if you disrespect them, they will remember it. One of the things they do when they're angry is spit at you. If you hurt a camel, it will scan your face and remember it, and it could attack you. Even though camels don't really attack humans, but there is a chance if you really hurt it. If you hurt them, they'll never forget you. But if you're friends with them, they'll never forget you and be your friend forever. In the Middle East, a lot of people use camel milk, and scientists believe that camel milk is better than cow milk because it has more vitamin C. In the countries around the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Peninsula, you could easily find camel milk in all types of stores. I haven't drank it. If you've drank it before, please leave a comment on how it tastes like. When you look at the fur a camel has around it, you'll think that it will die in this heat with that much protection. But that wool does the opposite, and it keeps the animal cool in the hot weather. Another interesting thing about camels is that it has GPS, but not really. It could remember some ways, especially the route it could take to get back home. But any route that it knows, it basically has to go back and forth a few times, then it might remember it. These are the reasons that some scientists say camels are smarter than horses. One of them, they can remember faces. It can remember routes. It could realize someone is disrespecting them and not like it. There are also hybrid versions of the camel. We have the Central Asian one and the Arabian camel, and then you'll get this one, where the hump is much larger. This is the only type of a hybrid camel you could do. Another thing you need to know about camels is that some people do drink the camel urine, especially in Arabic countries, but not like camel milk. There are different companies that actually put it in a bottle and packaging. A lot of chemists and scientists tested camel urine to see if it's bad or good, and they came to a conclusion that it's not good or bad because there's no virus or bacteria in it. This is Australia, a country with a lot of weird animals. You'll see spiders and snakes that you'll only find in Australia. When the British took over Australia, they realized that this land has a lot of weird animals. They also brought some animals from Africa and India, which we've made a video on before. But this video is about an animal that's only found in Australia, an animal called the emu, or an Australian ostrich. Let's start off in New York in the year 1929. The economy is booming. Everybody's getting rich by the day. Anybody that needs a loan, they can get it. The rates are very low, and everybody's happy. But this was too good to be true, because any balloon you fill up a little too much, it's gonna explode. At the end of 1929, the American economy crashes, and everything goes to zero. When something like this happens, the banks don't give out loans anymore, and that crashes the economy even harder. People don't buy anything, and that really hurts the economy. The American economy was so big back then that this crash really hurt the entire world. One of the countries that really suffered because of this was Australia, and they were nearing bankruptcy. Most of Australia's income is dependent on export, and when you can't export anything, you can't make any money. And the world economy was in a way that nobody was buying anything from Australia. At around this time, Australia had introduced their own currency, the Australian dollar, and it was dependent on the sterling British pound. And it's good to know, before this, sterling removed the gold standard that was behind it, and this really put a negative effect on the new Australian dollar. At this time, the UK wanted to help Australia for it not to crash any harder. But England couldn't even help themselves, and they both fell off a cliff. Before World War I, Australia gave its people farmland so they can start farming. And during the Great Depression, most of Australian population are farmers. But unfortunately, they're not making any money. That is why most of these farmers sold their land for cheap, and they wanted to go to the city to hopefully get a job. Most of the farmers left, and there is no more goods anymore. And that is why one of the farmers' biggest enemies didn't have any more food, and they were left hungry. This animal, the emu. It's good to know that Australia's national bird is the emu. The US has the bald eagle, and India has a bird like the peacock, and Australia got these little guys. Countries usually choose the most beautiful and special bird in their country, but Australia chose a national bird that they even consider it a pest. And that's because it's the enemy of farmland. It also has a very delicious meat as well. But because of the lack of farmers and produce, these emus were left hungry. First, let's get to know this animal a little bit. The Portuguese were the first people to write about emus, and they named it emus. This name originated from Arabic, which means large bird. Before we move on, we have to say that this is not a cassowary. Cassowary is also from Australia, and it's the most dangerous bird in the world. And if you try to fight it one-on-one, you will lose. The emu is very close to the ostrich, but they're very different at the same time. The Australian emu is very tall, and it could be as high as 2 meters, and it could speed up to 65 kilometers an hour. The ostrich that you usually see all originate from Africa, and even if you see it in Asia or America, it comes from Africa. Ostriches were around during the dinosaur era, around 80 million years ago, when the Earth was completely different and Australia was not isolated. When lands change, the location of these two changes as well. The African ones look like this, and the Australian ones evolved like this. But let's get back to the farmers. In the year 1932, when the economy was terrible, whatever the farmers planted, and when it got time for harvesting, they come out in the morning and see all their produce is gone. Something that you should know about emus is that they don't work solo. When they find some good food, they'll let everybody know so they could have a party. And that is why in Australia, they're considered pests, and they will attack a farmland with ease. When the emus destroyed the farmland, they would have some leftovers. But up next, there is another pest that Australia deals with, and that's rabbits. And they would destroy the farmland even harder than the emus. When the farmer was confronted with this, they would realize that all their goods are gone. They try to call the authorities, but then they realize that it was the animals that killed everything. In 1932, millions of dollars worth of produce is being eaten by these animals, and there was a massive shortage in the country, and this is when the government gets involved. Their solution was not very smart. They tell the Minister of Defense, George Pierce, to come up with the idea to deal with these emus. George Pierce was the Minister of War, so all he knew was war. He went to the Parliament and announced that we should declare war on the emus. Most of the people in the parliament got upset about this because it was the national bird of the country and we just can't kill it. George Pierce said in return that we'll kill them with weapons, but we're not gonna make them go extinct. We'll just lower the population so they won't destroy our farmland and our produce. Even though George Pierce declared war on the emus, his army wasn't that big. He only sent 3 people, and 2 of them had weapons, and 1 was just a tag-along. At that time, most of the emus lived in Western Australia, and they started around there. It seems like the emus knew that there was gonna be a war. That is why they were coming up with some strategies. But they weren't very organized. Every time they hear a shot go off, they just disperse and run away in all directions, and when they run at this speed, it's very hard to hit them. Even though they had automatic weapons, the first day they were only able to kill 12 of them, and this is in a way where emus are always close to each other, and they're in a pack of about 50. The emus win the first battle, and with 12 dead, they retreat back to their base. These 3 that were appointed this mission felt embarrassed. With these modern weapons that we have, we could barely kill any of these animals. That is why they came up with a new idea. They suggested to bring a truck and they can get in the back of the bed and shoot them while the person is driving. But that was a terrible idea because it was a failure. This is a 1930s truck and it could not drive off-road. If you go a little too fast, it will get stuck, or at worst, it will even flip over. What George Pierce was doing and these 3 was turning into a joke, and people were saying that Australia is losing a war to emus. In the Australian Parliament said, the emus deserve the medal more than the gentlemen involved in this project. They eventually changed their strategy and made their idea work better. They said we have to shoot them so fast and accurately that they really can't run away. They successfully killed 300 emus per week, and we're talking about the 3 people that were originally appointed. After 1,000 emus were killed, they called off the mission and it was considered a failure. And the emus won the war. After this, the farmers really tried to battle with these emus themselves, but they couldn't do anything about it because there was a lot of them, and even if you killed a few of them, there was plenty more to go around. Then eventually, other farmers came up with the genius idea, and that was to put a giant fence around their product, and they don't have to deal with the animals. Not only did the fence block the emus, it also stopped the rabbits from coming in. Throughout history, there is another name for this war, the Great Emu War. When we made the video about red mercury on our channel, we made a little mistake, and we talked about Dracula, jinn, and vampire bats, and we said they don't exist. But the vampire bat part was wrong, because it actually exists. Around the world, bats are known as scary animals. But actually they're not that dangerous, and they are very good for the environment. Bats are famous actors as well, and they're seen in many scary movies. If they're not the main character, they're always the side characters. But is this animal scary, dangerous? Should we worry? One type of bat is a vampire bat, and we have to be careful when we see them. But only if we live in this part of the world. From Mexico to Uruguay, this is the map of the vampire bats, and they look very similar to any other bat you've seen before. In our video about red mercury, a lot of you commented and said vampire bats are found everywhere, and they suck the blood of the cows in our area. But however we research, we only found them in Latin America and nowhere else. But in South Asia, in this area exactly, there is another vampire bat. But back in the day they thought it was a vampire bat. But after further research, they noticed it does not drink blood. And that is why from then on forward, they started calling the bat a false vampire bat. But let's get back to the environment these guys live in Latin America. At night, these guys leave their cave to go hunting for some blood, mostly domesticated animals that live in different farms, like pigs and cows, because they're the easiest prey. If you live in this area of the world, never sleep outside, because they can even suck the blood of humans. Them sucking the blood is not the bad part. The terrible part is that they could have diseases like rabies. A lot of people of Latin America, especially farmers, complain to the government that they should eradicate vampire bats. To get to know this animal a little better, let's go to Panama, a place where there's plenty of these guys. Do you see Panama, one of the smallest countries in the world? But in this little area, there is 120 different species of bats, and they have a higher population than the people. And of course, the most amount of different types of bats in one country is in Panama. If you go to a Panama airport, there is a high chance a person is going to Panama to study bats. But we have to say, it's not like all the bats in Panama are vampires. It's a very small percentage of them, but just that little amount could cause a lot of danger. Most of the places bats live are in jungle, creating these landscapes. They eat a lot of fruits, and they pass the seeds all over the ground, and that causes new trees to grow. They can even pollinate plants like bees. So you can't say that they are useless. One of the most important things it does is that it eats a lot of insects, especially mosquitoes. If they're very advanced, they could even kill flies. They attack most types of insects, but big bats could even attack different birds. These were the good bats that did a lot of good things for the environment. But let's go talk about the vampire bats. Not only are these the worst bats in the family, but they're very smart and strategic. And when they sense blood, they don't just attack, they go forward with strategy. Because usually they want to drink blood from an animal that could easily hurt them, and they want to sneak up to the food without the prey noticing. Vampire bats have a very sensitive nose, and before they cut into the skin, they can sense a vein under there or not, because they're not gonna work this hard to not puncture the vein, because they want all the blood they can get. The vampire bats has one of the sharpest teeth as well, and when they puncture skin, it's kind of like inserting a needle on there, and if you're not looking, you really won't notice it. Unlike other bats, vampire bats have nothing good going for them, and they don't help the environment whatsoever. To get to know the vampire bat a little bit better, we have to learn some history. Vampire bats lived in this part of Latin America for thousands of years, and they would drink the blood of different animals, but their population was much lower than it is today, because the animals that was available to them that they could drink from were very small and not plentiful. Then we get to 1493 when the Europeans come to America, and with them they bring different types of animals from Europe, and the most important ones are cows, chickens, and horses. These animals were a new food source that was very easy and plentiful for the vampire bats. That is why their population pretty much exploded, and it's around this time that these guys are a problem for animals and humans in that area. Hundreds of years has passed, but the population of vampire bats has stayed up, and they really can't control it. If you go to Latin America and you see a field of cows, horses, and different animals, just know that vampire bats are camping around that site, and they're waiting for nightfall. These guys are exactly like Dracula. Dracula came out at night, but obviously it's a fake story, not a real animal like this guy. Vampire bats hate the light. If you enter a cave and know that these guys are vampire bats, you have control with the flashlight in your hand, because when they see the light, they will most likely fly away. The way the vampire bats start drinking blood is that it punctures it, finishes the job, and leaves. But the biggest problems is the diseases that comes with it, especially rabies. Latin American farmers lose about $30 million because of vampire bats, because their cows get infected with rabies, or their horses. Humans are not safe either. Tens of people a year die in Latin America because of rabies, and the rabies is caused by vampire bats. When you speak with Latin American farmers, they hate the vampire bat. But on the other side, they love every other bats because they help their farms grow. And without them, their lives would be a little bit more difficult. If you want to poison them, they would die. But you will most likely kill a lot of good bats. And that makes it not worth it. So is there any good things about the vampire bat? Scientists say the only good thing that comes out of the vampire bat is its spit. Its saliva has a special ingredient that lets the blood flow rather than stop when you make a cut. And this is a great thing for drug companies. When it bites the animal, its spit hits it and it lets the blood flow rather than stop. Either way, no good idea has come out to a way where we can eradicate these animals without damaging the environment. But scientists say we can control these animals so they don't carry the rabies disease. If they want to drink blood, that's fine, but don't infect animals and humans with it. Another thing we have to say that vampire bats don't attack people because it uses strategy, and its plan is to drink blood in a way where the prey doesn't understand it. And that is why when researchers go into the cave, they're not scared of the vampire bat and they know they're safe. We have to know that vampire bats are nowhere else but Latin America, and all the bats in other areas do good things for the environment. Us humans communicate very easily with each other, and most of the time we're speaking to each other. But we can't do the same thing with other animals. We can teach little tricks to dogs and cats, but we really can't teach them how to speak. Between all these animals, the only animal we can actually speak to is a gorilla. If you've seen our video about pathological lying, you most likely got to know this gorilla, Coco. Coco has passed away, but when he was alive, he was one of the smartest gorillas we've ever gotten to know. You could talk to him with American Sign Language. He wouldn't understand words, but he would understand signs easily, and in most cases, he would reply with signing. Coco made humans realize the true power of a gorilla brain. This gorilla you're seeing is not very similar to humans, except some body parts. But you have to know that 98% of the gorilla's DNA is similar to a human DNA. A gorilla is much bigger and stronger, but its brain is obviously less complex and smaller. Don't look at Coco where he just talks to people and communicates. Gorillas are still wild animals. They don't want to attack humans, but if they feel threatened, they will easily attack. Gorilla is a very powerful animal, but what separates it from other powerful animals is that it's actually smart, and you really can't say the same thing like, for example, a bear. Where do these guys live? In Central Africa, in two different places. Between where the two different gorillas live, there's 900 kilometers of forest. Scientists believe that since the Ice Age, these two gorillas were separated from one another, and the Congo forest kept expanding, and day by day, these two were separated. The last Ice Age also happened around 11,500 years ago, and that is why they don't look similar to one another, and that means they evolved differently in different environments. 11,500 years is not a lot for evolution to take place, but you will see differences. In a lot of animals, especially monkeys, you'll notice that the male is much stronger than the female, but the difference in gorillas is ginormous, way bigger than any other animal. Like, look at these two. They're the same age, but the difference is huge. In a lot of animal kingdoms, even humans sometimes, the most powerful is the alpha, or basically the leader. The most powerful wolf is gonna be the alpha. Between gorillas, it's very easy to spot the alpha because they're usually a silverback male gorilla, and you could tell by the size that this one is the leader. An average weight of a silverback gorilla is 180 kilos, but this animal is a champion in deadlifting. You might not believe it, but a gorilla will be able to pick up 450 kilos from the ground. 2.5 times its body weight. This is the average weight an average silverback could pick up. But the most powerful gorilla that was able to deadlift the maximum amount of weight recorded was about 815 kilograms. When you compare the bones and muscle structure of a gorilla to a human, you'll notice that they're not that different. It looks thicker and stronger, but how is it possible for a gorilla to be so much stronger than a human, and a human doesn't even have half the power? The first reason is that its bone is much more strong, even though it's not that thick. A gorilla bone is not like the human bone, where with a hit it could damage. A gorilla bone structure is like a spring, and it has play rather than breaking. That's why with all this weight, it could climb a tree with one hand with no problem. Anybody that looks at a gorilla and looks at these teeth, they think that a gorilla is a carnivorous predator, but gorillas don't eat meat at all, and they're omnivores. Gorillas can eat and digest meat, but they prefer not to. In a place where there's a lot of fruits and veggies, they don't want any meat. But for it to get full, they need at least 18 kilograms worth of food every 24 hours. That is why most of the times where you see gorillas, they're usually eating. If you've seen our video about pandas, you'll know that these animals should not eat plants. They have to eat meat. And this plant eating basically destroys the animal's life. But a gorilla is the opposite. They eat plants and fruits, but they're not weak at all. Weak as in terms of a panda doesn't even have energy to move sometimes, but a gorilla has plenty. They eat all types of fruits and vegetables, and they have enough energy for anything. And the main reason is that inside the animal's gut, the cellulose is broken down. If a human eats cellulose, it does not get digested, it just passes through. That is why gorillas have energy. They can digest the cellulose and produce protein for their body. Gorillas don't really fight, but if two silverbacks are confronted with one another, there is a high chance there will be a fight, and they won't stop until one is dead. They're like roosters, but much worse. In each group, there can't be more than one silverback, and if that's not the case, one has to run away, or they have to fight to the death. But silverbacks have so much pride that they would rather die in a battle than run away. If you guys know chimpanzees, you know that they use different tools, but nothing complicated. They can use wooden tools for different jobs. And of course, they use rocks as hammers and they break stuff with it. But gorillas don't really use these tools, and they use their hand for everything. Female gorillas have been seen using tools. Like for example, they want to pass through a river and they have kids with them. And with the help of a stick, they can check the depth of that river so their kids can pass through safely. A gorilla is a very social animal, and they most likely live together. The amount of females and kids doesn't matter. There can only be one alpha per group, and if it's not that, the family will be broken up. In different monkeys, the female has to raise the children, and if something happens to her, the male will run away. But in gorillas, you can't find that. And if something happens to the female gorilla, even the silverback will raise the children until they get older. After humans, gorillas are the only type of animal that speak with one another in their group. Not speaking as in words, but with sign language and moving their mouth. The same thing Coco would do in sign language. The way they communicate is very interesting. They move their hand and make different noises, and it seems like they can understand one another. The thing they taught Coco, they tried with different monkeys, especially chimpanzees. But gorillas were unique in this term because they would learn very fast. Coco taught scientists that they're smarter than other animals, and the more you teach them, the more they want to learn. One time Coco sees a person with a mask and asks his instructor what that is, and he would keep signing hat and eye until the instructor realized that he's talking about a mask, and he was taught what a mask is. When they taught Coco what a cat is and he realized what kind of an animal it is, he would not stop talking about it, and then eventually he was given a pet cat. Coco loved this animal so much that he kept it like a child. In our video about pathological lying, we explained that when Coco was playing, he accidentally destroyed a sink. When the instructor asked who did this, Coco points to the cat, but there was cameras in that room and everybody saw that Coco broke the sink. And you could say this was the first lie recorded by an animal. Scientists always want to figure out how gorillas communicate with each other, and in other words, they basically want to learn their language. But the more they look at them, the more confused they get, and they can't fathom how they speak and communicate. This problem is seen in dolphins, elephants, and wolves. They can communicate with each other by making noise and moving, but we can't understand what it is. And gorillas are the same thing. Some scientists say instead of teaching gorillas sign language, we should try to learn their language, because they for sure communicate, but we just can't understand it. Another interesting story about apes and monkeys is that in the 1920s, Stalin wanted to upgrade the Red Army, and that means basically making monkey hybrids for his soldiers. Monkey power, but human brain. He hires different scientists to basically mate humans and monkeys together, so he can have a soldier with the strength of a gorilla, but the brain of a human. Scientists tried their hardest because they were mostly scared of Stalin, but the more they tried, they didn't get any results. Even though the gorilla DNA is extremely close to us, but something like this will never work. This is the deadliest creature in the world. It's hard to believe, but this little insect kills hundreds of thousands of people a year. There are a lot of animals that bite or sting you, but this animal biting a person has caused more destruction than any other animal. This disgusting insect injects a person with different types of virus that causes a slow, drastic death, like malaria. There is no more introduction needed for this insect. Everybody knows it, the mosquito. Mosquito is a blood-sucking pest, but not all of them. Only females need blood because they need the nutrition inside it to lay eggs. When a female mosquito is ready to lay eggs, they just need a small body of water so she can lay her eggs, and in about 5 days the eggs hatch. Usually dirty standing water is perfect for laying eggs for mosquitoes, but it could do it in clean water as well. Usually when you see a mosquito, it sits on a skin and bites the skin and starts sucking blood. We all think that it's a skinny needle that inserts the body and starts sucking like it's a straw. But if you see this needle under the microscope, you see 6 different types of needles. First of all, these 6 are inside a trunk-type skin. The 2 outside ones are blades that are kind of like saws, and they're the first ones that insert the skin and creates the hole. And it's good to note that these are the thinnest needles. The next sets are designed to hold the cut open so the work can be done. So these 2 act like a pry bar, while the main needle, that's basically the main straw that sucks the blood, inserts the skin. And in the beginning, it has to look for a blood vessel. The tip of a needle has a sensor that looks for a blood vessels and realizes where to puncture. When it eventually reaches the blood vessel, the main needle inserts into it and starts sucking the blood. But one needle is still left alone. What does that do? Its job is basically to insert a type of liquid that doesn't let the blood clot up, and it keeps the blood flowing. You might not know this, but 60% of human blood is made up of water, and the mosquito does not need this much water. And that is why, while it's sucking blood, it's basically urinating the water inside the blood. So its stomach has a separator. The female mosquito is only looking for that red blood cell. The itch you get after a mosquito bite is because of that little liquid it sprayed in to keep the blood flowing. So it's not that bad, it just gets some blood and leaves, right? But before it pulls the main needle out, it leaves whoever it's sucking blood from a little present. Any virus that's inside the mosquito, it would leave a little sample in the place the blood was extracted. You have to take this part seriously. This is the reason mosquitoes are the deadliest creatures in the world. The virus does not belong to the mosquito itself, and when a mosquito is born, it doesn't have any virus inside it, but it gets different types of viruses from different animals and basically passes it around. From the day a mosquito is born to the day it dies, if it doesn't get killed by anyone, it lives about 1 week. But in this very short life, it does everything it needs to. It drinks blood, it passes it around different types of virus, and it lays eggs. So when it dies, it basically doesn't have any more wishes. Most animals in the world do something good for the planet, but mosquitoes don't do anything special. The only useful thing they're good for is that they're food for other types of animals, like frogs, different types of lizards, dragonfly, and many more. The story of the life of mosquito is so deadly that we don't know where to start. The deadliest virus that mosquitoes have passed around throughout history is malaria, and it has been killing humans for thousands of years. And the only thing to blame is the mosquito. First, let's learn what the word malaria means and where it's from. This word is made up of two Italian words. Mal means bad, and aria means air, so it means bad air. And the reason is, back in the day, they thought pollution was causing this virus to kill people. They didn't know that it's this little insect's fault. You have to know this, not every mosquito has malaria. These mosquitoes are very low in numbers, and they live in certain parts of the world. Do you see this map? The red section, it means malaria occurs throughout all of it, and the red sections are parts of the equator. In the yellow section, it occurs in some part, and in the green sections, it's basically eradicated. But allow us to get to know this virus a little bit better. When the malaria virus enters your body, it goes into the bloodstream and quickly gets itself to the liver. The virus itself, just like the mosquito, is very scary and strategic. It enters the body in a way where it tricks the white blood cells, and it tricks a body in a way where the white blood cells don't realize that there is an intruder in the body, and that is why the virus very easily gets itself to the liver. When the virus enters your body, in the beginning, the person doesn't feel a thing because the virus has not began the plan yet. The virus first starts to multiply inside the liver. When the virus amount starts to rise inside the human liver, it makes itself look like a red blood cell, and then it enters the bloodstream. If you look at a red blood cell compared to a malaria virus that's making itself look like a blood cell, it looks like this. The left one is a malaria virus, and just like the red blood cell on the right, it's not smooth whatsoever. When all this is happening, the human is not feeling a thing. But after a while, your immune system realizes that there is an intruder inside the body, and you could say it feels scammed, and all of a sudden, it starts attacking the virus. But the malaria virus is more clever than you think. It starts changing its shape and form to dumb down the white blood cells, and they don't realize that what's an intruder or what is good, and they don't know which one to attack. This is the time people start feeling sick, feeling a fever, they sweat heavily, and it could even put the person into a coma. It has already attacked the liver, and now it's time to attack the kidneys, and it's this stage that it could cause kidney failure. So what does a patient that's suffering from this have to do? They have to immediately get to the hospital. The later you go to the hospital, the chances of living is quite slim, because the longer you take, the more damage your body parts are taking. That is why when people go to areas that have malaria, like for example Central Africa, beforehand they have to take a certain vaccine, they have to take certain medications in the trip, and whenever they get back from the trip, they have to be tested to make sure there's no malaria in their system. If you've seen our video about rabies, You'll know that rabies mostly kills people in very poor countries and conditions, and that's mainly in Africa and India. Malaria is pretty much the same thing. When you don't have access to doctors and hospital, the amount of death in that area is extremely high. You might not believe it because we're in 2023, but statistics shows in the year 2022, more than 600,000 people were killed with malaria. Do you see how many people this thing is killing? How is something so small killing this many people? And the 600,000 people that died last year was 100% the mosquito's fault. The oldest writing about a sickness like this is about 2,000 years old in China. From that time to this day, more than 300 million people have died because of this virus, and it was all because of the mosquito. So that is why this disgusting creature is the deadliest animal on Earth. So who's in second place? First comment, see who gets it right. The second deadliest animal is this, the human, and humans are responsible for 430,000 deaths per year. The third deadliest animal on Earth are saltwater snails, and you could find these guys everywhere. And just like mosquitoes, it's not the snail itself, but rather than the parasite that they carry. And because of these parasites, more than 200,000 people die per year. To counter mosquitoes in your area, you have to make sure you don't create a nest for it where they can lay eggs. And that means don't leave standing water near your house, because this water could be a perfect place for the mosquito to lay eggs. They say for places that you can't solve, pesticides is the best idea, and the mosquitoes stay away from that entire area. Everybody has heard of Australia. This piece of land and a few countries next to it is counted as a continent, the continent of Oceania. In Australia, you can find many different weird animals, and there are a lot of dangerous ones as well. You're not safe in the waters around this land either. If you feel like going swimming, you gotta watch out for sharks and extremely dangerous jellyfish that could kill you with one zap. But let's leave the sea and get back to land. Australia doesn't lack any dangerous animals, like this crocodile, saltwater crocodiles to be exact. The biggest and most dangerous crocodiles are saltwater crocodile, and you can find these guys around Australia. If you live in Australia or are visiting and don't know anything about the spiders in this land, you should run away immediately, because there are some poisonous spiders that will kill a person with ease. If you visit Central Australia, you will see the most poisonous snake in the world, the inland taipan. The most dangerous bird also lives in Australia, the cassowary. If this bird is angry at you, it will smash his beak against you like a hammer and most likely kill you. And if that doesn't hurt a person, they will start smashing you with their dinosaur-like legs. Australia also has animals that were brought from other places, like rabbits, camels, cows, and sheep. And we talked about these guys in plenty of other videos. But let's get to the point of this video. We want to talk about the most famous and most interesting animal in Australia, the kangaroo. If you're visiting Australia and you see a kangaroo chilling in the water, do not approach it, because the only thing that kangaroo is interested in is drag any human or living thing inside that water and drown them. You might ask, what's wrong with it? Why would it drown animals for fun? Is it gonna eat it? No, it looks like it just does it for fun. And most of the time, the kangaroos do this to dogs. When a dog approaches a pond with a kangaroo in it, it doesn't realize how strong that kangaroo is, and there's a high chance it will get drowned. It's good to know that kangaroos have done this to humans as well, but to people that didn't realize how powerful this animal is. When you look at it from afar, it looks like a deer, but it's nothing like that animal. It's extremely powerful, and it doesn't need much to kill a person. Some animals have horns, some have teeth to bite, but kangaroos don't do any of that. Kangaroos have a skill of wrestling, boxing, kickboxing, taekwondo, and you can add kung fu to the list as well. A male kangaroo has to be very powerful because it will be fighting throughout his life to assert dominance to the female. When two roosters fight, they will fight each other to the death, and they won't stop until one dies. But when two male kangaroos are fighting, the weaker one usually realizes that he's not going to win this fight, so he backs off. And that is why we haven't witnessed a kangaroo dying in a fight. But why are kangaroos only found in Australia? About 160 million years ago, when all of the Earth's lands were connected to each other, an ancient marsupial used to live on this land, and kangaroo is part of the marsupial family. And this ancient marsupial used to live on this Earth that looked like nothing like today. Time passes and these marsupials get separated from one another, and some of them stay in Australia that's disconnected from the entire world. And one of those animals turned out to be a kangaroo. You have to know that this took more than 100 million years. And some people say, why don't we see evolution right in front of our eyes? Right now is nothing. Even 2,000 years ago to today, there's no difference, let alone a human lifetime. And plus, different parts of Australia has different kangaroos. And nowadays, there are 6 different kangaroos living in Australia and New Guinea, the island right next to Australia. A kangaroo pregnancy is very interesting. The baby stays in the mother's tummy for 36 days and they're born, but the baby is not ready yet. It has to stay in the sack and drink the mother's milk for about 6 months. And then after 6 months, it's ready to come out and it's ready to fight the other kangaroos and have fun. Scientists that examined the kangaroo and its fossils realized that about 20 million years ago, the kangaroo had legs like this. And it's the legs that are so strong that allow it to jump around everywhere. But before then, it was walking on all fours like a deer. But why does a kangaroo have legs like this? Because Australia is many open field, and a kangaroo has to run for a very long time. So it evolved in a way where it doesn't run out of oxygen in a very short sprint like dogs, lions, or any other mammal. In the 1970s, scientists were extremely interested to realize how they can run for such a long time. And after running some tests and seeing the oxygen intake, they realized that kangaroos barely use oxygen while they're hopping. The only time they use a lot of oxygen is when they're beginning to run. Then it seems like it puts it in neutral and just keeps going without really breathing hard. Hopping is very interesting because it reaches a speed of 30 kilometers an hour and it could keep this speed for 3 kilometers long. That's pretty insane, running at this speed for such a long time. This is with the speed of 30 kilometers. If the kangaroo feels danger, it could speed all the way to 70 kilometers an hour, but that's for a short period of time. We could say kangaroos are one of the fastest animals on Earth. We said one of, because there are other animals that are faster than kangaroos. Kangaroos are also bodybuilders because they have one of the most muscle mass out of any animal, especially its leg and tail. It didn't really bodybuild, but they're so active that they're continuously building muscles. Do you see the kangaroo's tail, how it's long and thick? That's the balance of the animal. And you could say the rear end of this animal weighs the same as the front end. And if it ever feels like falling from the two legs, the tail or front end could adjust and reach balance once again. So what does a kangaroo eat? Nothing special, just grass and hay. The same thing cows and sheep eat. Another interesting fact about kangaroos is that the people call a group of kangaroos a mob. And you could look at them like a mafia. And when they're together, they're not the friendliest animal in the world. Low amounts of water in Australia had made the kangaroo evolve in a way where it doesn't need water for weeks, but it does have to eat, but no water is needed for a few weeks. It's not like it does that for fun, but if there's a shortage of water, it will survive. When sheep and cows eat grass, the bacteria in their stomach digests the food and creates methane gas, and it's farted or burped out. Kangaroos do the same thing, but their stomach is much more efficient than cows and sheep's, and that is why it produces much less methane. Kangaroos are much more active as well, and they're not standing around like cows all day. The kangaroo's stomach does something else that's interesting. It turns the food to acidic acid, and that means the kangaroo could use this acid to grow muscles. From all the 6 different types of kangaroos, all of them are big, but the biggest ones are the red kangaroos. The red kangaroo can weigh up to 90 kilos and be as tall as 2 meters, and that's like an NBA player. When a baby kangaroo is born, from the very first day they can walk and run, they start activities with their parents or sibling, and that is why they start growing their muscle at a very young age. And that is why you really can't find fat or lazy kangaroos. And this has nothing to do with male and female. Both of them have to go to weightlifting class. They run around and jump on each other's head for fun. The kangaroo is not a dumb animal either. If it's alone and sees a human approaching him, or it's angry at a human, it's not gonna pick a fight for no reason, and it will most likely run away. This is the same for other animals. It's not interested in fighting them, but you can't trust it because it is a wild animal. It might all of a sudden get angry and punch you, or worst of all, give you a double kick. Another interesting fact about kangaroos is that taller and more muscular kangaroos have an easier time finding a mate rather than the small ones or the less muscular. So how long do kangaroos live for? Their lifespan is very short because in nature, kangaroos don't live much more than 9 years. But under human care, they can live up to 25 years. If you were in Australia and confronted with a kangaroo, try to get away from it or change your path. If you're confronted with a group of kangaroos, you should for sure run away because they're like a mob and they will attack you. We've always been told the hardest animal to kill are cockroaches, and they've been on Earth for about 300 million years. These guys even survived the dinosaur extinction 65 million years ago, and they were able to continue living. But in this video, we want to introduce you to an animal that not only is it one of the oldest living things, but it is for sure the hardest animal to kill. Water bear, or another word, tardigrade. What does this thing have to do with bears that is the water version? Do you see the way it looks? It kind of resembles a bear, and that is why they call it that. The reason it's called the water bear because it prefers to live in water. But you could also find water bears on land. It doesn't have to be water. Tardigrades or water bears are an extremely unique animal because there's nothing like it. And you can't find any animal that's similar to tardigrades or comes from the same family. There are different tardigrades throughout the world, and they look a little bit different from one another. But they're not that different. The size of the tardigrade is usually under 0.5 millimeter, and this little guy has 8 legs. And that's one of the weirdest things, that an animal this size has 8 legs. When you look at tardigrade photos, it looks like a brown bear, but when you actually take a look under the microscope and see the real deal, you see that the body is transparent. And you could see the insides of the entire body. You can even see the cells inside the body. Anywhere that there's a drop of water, you could find tardigrades living in there. It's so small that even drops of water around the world, there could be tardigrades living inside it and we wouldn't even know. For the tardigrade, that little bit of water is like a sea. But what would happen if this little bit of water dries up? There's no problem for the water bear. This is the reason they call it the most extreme animal. You can't find a place on planet Earth that the tardigrade won't survive, because it could adapt with the environment extremely quickly. You could find them in the North Pole, in the equator, and in Antarctica. Even though tardigrades live in water, but they're not great swimmers. The place where you can find plenty of these little guys is in fresh water, especially the ones with plants and algae inside the water. Water bears love algae, and it's one of the best foods for it. If you have a pool that hasn't had its water exchanged and algae is growing, you're gonna have some water bears living in there. Except algae or other plants inside fresh water, tardigrades eat something else, and that's single-cell organisms because it's bigger than them. Tardigrades are extremely cute, but there's a version of them that are more cute than the other ones, the ones that have eyes. The black dot you're seeing is its eyes, but that eye is made up of one cell. If you want to compare it to a human eye, you have to know that one eyeball has over 100 million cells, but the entire body of the water bear doesn't even break 10,000 most of the time. The ones with the eyes is for sure the coolest ones. Tardigrades are known as cute animals around the world. Tardigrades also shed their skins, and that's once in a while, especially when they get a little bit bigger. Some female water bears lay their eggs inside the skin and shed it with the eggs inside there. And that allows the eggs to be a little bit more safe throughout the environment. When a tardigrade is born, it has the same amount of cells to when it grows up, but the newborn has tiny cells, and throughout its life, the cells grow, and up next, the tardigrade itself grows, but the amount of cells never grows, unlike most animals in the world. The brown dot you're seeing is basically its stomach. And just like every living thing, when it consumes all the nutrition of the food, it basically lets go of the waste. But what makes water bears so interesting, and why are they so famous around the world? Because of how extreme they are. The test that this animal has passed left every scientist in shock. Water bear can survive at as negative 272 degrees centigrade. And even if you put it in hot boiling water inside your tea kettle, it's still gonna survive because it has 50 more degrees to go. Tardigrades can survive up to 150 degrees centigrade. That's insane. Think about it. Minus 272 degrees till 150 degrees centigrade. This is why it's called the most extreme animal in the world. NASA has even sent water bears to space to see what would happen if you take them inside the vacuum. They took them inside the vacuum, and after a few hours, they returned them to the laboratory in the station and started running some tests. They noticed nothing happened to them and they're still alive, and this truly shocked everybody. You can't find another animal that could stay alive in the vacuum of space. In the vacuum of space, not only is there tremendous amount of pressure, but there is a lot of radiation from the sun and other space radiations, and no living thing will be able to survive inside the vacuum of space, except the water bear. But there's a huge question here. How does this animal get away with it and it survives? In that freezing temperature, in that hot temperature, worst of all, in the vacuum of space. The way the tardigrade body works is amazing, because if it notices danger where it's not going to survive, it turns its metabolism down to 0.01%, and that basically puts the animal in a coma, but it's still alive. Since the environment is not ready for it to come back, it closes the curtains and takes a nap until the environment gets better. When the tardigrade does this to its metabolism, if you see it, everybody would think it's dead because it doesn't move whatsoever, but they are still alive. And if you make that environment livable again, the tardigrade will come back to life and start living again. This is one of the ways it survives extreme places, but it's not the only way. For different situations, it has different solutions. Like for example, if a tardigrade is found in an environment where all the water dries out, it takes the sugar inside its body and start turning it into water, and that allows it to stay alive until more water shows up. Tardigrades also have another system, and that's for places where there is a lack of oxygen. This time, it also turns the power of its body off and stays there like a dead insect. But in reality, it's alive and it's just waiting for the oxygen to return so it can come back to life. Even though water bears are a master at surviving and they could survive the most extreme temperatures, but they are not immortal and you could easily kill them yourself. It's also a great food source for other living things, especially rounded worms, and one of its main food sources are tardigrade. It could survive the most extreme temperatures and places, but compared to this worm, it doesn't have anything to say and it will be defeated. If bigger water bears get hungry, they will eat the smaller ones. How long do tardigrades live for anyways? Based on its size, it has an extremely long life. Tiny animals usually don't have a long lifespan, but water bears could survive up to 30 years. But that's if it doesn't get attacked. Just like every living thing on the planet, water bears just want an easy life and an easy place to live, where there's no danger and there's plenty of food. But unfortunately, you can't always have a good life, just like every living thing, including humans. There is a chance you could be well off, or you could be in a terrible situation where you can get killed easily. Lake. But what are the bad things about water bears? You could find them in lakes and fresh waters. You could find them in algae, in the mud, in the sand. What's the bad thing about it? We have to say that it's nothing. It doesn't do anything bad for us or the environment, and it being alive helps other living animals. It's the food for these worms. It gets rid of a lot of single cell organisms because it eats them. That is one of the main reasons that water bears have survived the planet for such a long time, because it doesn't really bother anybody and lives its life. These little water bears with those tiny eyes have seen animals that when they move, they would make the ground shake. Those all died, but this little guy is still alive and well. It has been 500 million years since water bears lived on Earth, and it's considered one of the oldest animals on the planet. In terms of diversity, land animals have nothing on sea creatures. In terms of complexity and diversity, sea creatures are undefeated, and plus, they're much weirder. Any creature you look at has its unique features. And of course, like land animals, there are plenty of predators that live in the waters, and the most famous one is the shark, and their job is the same exact thing. They hunt to survive. You might think the shark is the most powerful one, but that's not the case. only 48% of the attempted kill is actually successful. So that means most of the times, meaning 52%, they don't catch the prey. We have another predator called the leopard seal, and this thing is 64% successful. But what we're looking for is the most successful predator in all of the oceans. And that means a creature where anything it attempts to catch, it does. If you've seen our videos before, you'll know that the most successful predator of all time is the dragonfly, where nearly 100% of the prey it tries to catch is successfully caught. But the most successful predator in the waters is this, the seahorse. It only resembles a horse just a little bit, but it has nothing to do with the actual horse. A seahorse is extremely stealthy, and any type of food that's confronted with the seahorse is gonna have a bad time. In all of the Earth's waters, there's 50 different types of seahorse, and they come as little as 2 centimeters, and they could be super giant and be as big as 35 centimeters. The kill rate of the seahorse does not reach the dragonfly, which holds a 100% record, but it's up there, and it can catch 90% of the prey it goes for, so it's 2 times more effective than a great white shark. Have you guys ever seen a chameleon eye, which looks like a very sophisticated camera lens? Well, the seahorse has the same style eyes, where it can move around. And these eyes allows the creature to watch out everywhere without moving its head. The seahorse has a very cool tail as well, which can get wrapped around stuff and hold on to. It doesn't need to swim to keep itself stable, and it could focus on catching food. You guys have seen other animals how they give birth or lay eggs. The seahorse is extremely weird in this case as well. The seahorse is the only creature where the female produces the eggs and pours it into the male's stomach, and the male is the one that gets pregnant. It's not a mammal, but the male gets pregnant, and when the babies are ready, they are born through the male. It's interesting because when the male receives the eggs, they're not fertilized yet. The sperm enters the egg and gets fertilized. When the male is ready to give birth to these newborns, it basically shoots them out of its stomach, and the newborns look exactly like a tiny seahorse. Based on the size of the seahorse, every 10 days to 6 weeks, a seahorse can give birth. And when it's giving birth, nearly 1,000 seahorse come out, but only 0.5% of them survive. Just like we said, the seahorse is the only creature in the world where the male gets pregnant and gives birth. And scientists are always looking at these creatures to figure out why that's the case and what happened for this to happen. So when you live in the wild and you're this small and this slow, you're gonna be in extreme dangers, right? Like for example, a crab has an extremely hard shell, and that allows it to survive because predators don't just pick it up and start eating it because of the hard shell, except humans where they can get around that shell. But unlike a crab, the seahorse has a very soft body, and when I say soft, I mean plastic-like, where it plays instead of break. Even though it has a complex bone structure, but the bones play with each other and open and close against each other. So if a creature bites it, it crushes, but then it goes back again to its original form. That is why in most attacks, the seahorse will stay alive, unless a predator bites the whole animal whole. One of the most interesting tails on an animal belongs to the seahorse as well. It has a very complex bone structure, but it could flex and turn in whichever direction the animal feels like it. Even though the seahorse has been living in the water all its life, but it's a terrible swimmer, and that's one of the reasons its tail has evolved the way it has, where it can stay stationary while the food comes to them. The only thing that allows it to swim steadily is this little flap you see on its back, and that is why it holds another record, the slowest fish in the water. You might say this is not a fish. Yes, seahorses are considered fishes, and they're under the Cygnethidae family. let's look at the history of the seahorse. Compared to other creatures in the water, the history of the seahorse is very complicated and hard to understand. But scientists believe the ancestor of the seahorse was this creature, a creature called the pygmy pipe horse, and it lived on Earth about 25 million years ago. But it has evolved to the seahorse now. So the seahorse has been around here for about 25 million years. 25 million years might be very old, but compared to other creatures is not that much. Like a shark has been on Earth for more than 450 million years. The shark is one of the most ancient creatures in Earth's history, and it's still around to this day. Where do seahorses live anyway? You can find most seahorses living in shallow water, where there's a lot of plants and corals. So why do they live next to these? So it could hide itself and be more stealthy. Just like a tiger, where it can stay in tall grass and surprise its prey. So a seahorse conceals itself with the surrounding so the other predators don't see it, and the prey can approach it without feeling risky. Another huge difference that the seahorse has and other creatures don't is that it doesn't have a stomach, and that means it's always hungry. So you could say it eats and it leaves its body from the other side in a few minutes, and it doesn't really hold it in its stomach so it can use the calories efficiently. So evolution has helped this creature to be able to hunt and be successful. If it wasn't a good hunter or a predator, it would have been extinct millions of years ago. Have you guys seen how an owl hunts? An extremely patient bird, it only waits, and when it's time to actually attack, it flies at the most quiet flight you've ever seen and catches the prey. The seahorse is kind of similar to the owl in this case. It's a very patient creature and it doesn't make any noise. It slowly creeps up to the food and all of a sudden it eats it. The way it catches the prey is amazing, and it's hard to believe that a living creature can snap its head like that. Scientists that study seahorses have come up with the idea that the way the muscles are set up in the neck and head area of this creature make it have a snapshot effect. It builds up the power inside the muscles and then it releases, allowing it to catch it extremely quickly. The most amount of food a seahorse eats, it's this, the coat pod. And the reason that the seahorse kind of resembles a horse is because throughout the years the nose has gotten longer and longer to make hunting easier. The creatures in the water are much weirder than the animals on land, but when you pay attention closely, you realize that every weird feature on these animals is something that helps them out, and there is always a reason behind it. The number one reason, of course, is survival and finding food. So if they didn't go through these weird changes, the chances of survival would be slim and they would have been extinct a long time ago, just like a lot of their family members. So when you see this creature, an animal that looks like a horse, that is very cute and weird, and it doesn't even know how to swim properly. But you have to know that the seahorse didn't evolve to be a good swimmer. It just wanted to find food and not be bothered. And that is why more than 90% of the prey it tries to catch is successful. On this map, you could see where you can find seahorses. Anywhere that's yellow, you can find them. Usually places where it's shallow. And as you can see, you can't find them in deep waters. And that includes lakes as well. Like the Caspian, you can't find these creatures. There are plenty of videos about Australia, and most of them are usually about their animals because they're so unique, and a lot of them are very dangerous and want to kill you. A lot of these animals were brought here by the British from different parts of the world like Africa and India. You have animals from goats, camel, and worst of all, rabbits. They brought these animals, and not only did they not help, but they ruined the ecosystem of that country. But let's continue. Let's talk about a pest that has been in Australia ever since we've known it. You can find this roach in sugarcane farms, and it's called the cane beetle. These cane beetles do not help sugarcane plants whatsoever. They literally destroy the roots of the plant and ruin the entire farm. They used all types of pesticides and it didn't work. They tried to make a poison, but nothing was good. The Department of Agriculture was always trying to figure out a way on how to get rid of these cane beetles because their sugarcane farms were being destroyed every year. Some of these experts figured out the way. They say you can't get rid of these pests with poison or anything. You have to bring their enemy to their backyard. Who was their enemy? This creature, the cane toad, where you can find them only in Latin America and nowhere else. It was a great idea at first, and the Australians were in such a hurry that they didn't even try to experiment or research on what it would do to their ecosystem. At the same time, the American government was trying to take these toads into the nature of Hawaii, and it was doing a whole lot of experiments before it actually introduced it. When the Americans were working on these toads, they had a whole lot of them in the laboratory. So the Australians very quickly asked the Americans if they can buy some of these toads off of them. The US government sells Australia 100 of these toads, and they finally enter the country. And the first thing they did was not experiment on it, but they put them everywhere in the farms they wanted. You could say when these toads entered the ecosystem of Australia, they felt at home and they wanted to have as many as babies as possible. So 100 of these toads turned into 1,000 very quickly, then 10,000. Then all of a sudden you have over 100 million cane toads in your country. You could say when the Department of Agriculture of Australia saw what they have done to their own ecosystem, they were not happy about it because it's one of the worst things you could do to your own country. They realized that they had ruined the entire area by just bringing 100 of these frogs here. This toad is just a giant frog. It's venomous, and getting rid of it is damn near impossible. Anything you get rid of, it's gonna get replaced anyway. The biggest ones can be as long as 40 centimeters and weigh as much as 3 kilos. It's like a tiny monster. The good thing about this toad is that it eats anything, so it cleans the environment. Most importantly, it eats insects, dead animals, rotten animals, and basically cleans the entire area. But when their population grows this much, they do more harm than good. I'm not sure what the Australian scientists and experts were thinking. The reason they brought this toad is to get rid of the cane beetle, the main reason they're losing cane sugars. But it's unfortunate because most of the time, the cane beetle lives underground, so it doesn't really come out unless it wants to do something. And underground, it's somewhere where this toad doesn't have access to, so it's considered a useless animal for hunting these beetles. Throughout history, this is where this toad used to live, in Latin America. But the red sections, especially Australia, is the places it was introduced by humans. When the Australians introduced them to Australia, the toads loved them so much that they grew exponentially, where their population is much larger than the place they originated from. You have no hope for this toad to help with the sugarcane, but that's not the only problem this toad carries. The main problem is the cane toad is ruining the ecosystem of Australia. You have a lot of different animals and plants that were brought here from different places and introduced to a whole new area, and they didn't cause any problems. Like for example, honeybees were never in North and South America. It was the Europeans that brought them in the 1600s. It doesn't cause any issues either. It was around the same time where the Europeans brought potatoes from South America all the way to Europe for the very first time. And now you have potatoes everywhere in the world, and it's not a problem. Another problem in third world countries especially are cats. Cats are very loving animals and they're not a problem. But when you let their population grow exponentially without controlling it, they're gonna be a huge problem. You could say the cat is the best hunter, but it's also a domesticated animal. So if it wants to hunt something especially smaller than itself, it has no problems. It kills all types of pests like mice. Also, worst of all, it kills all types of birds. In most countries of the world, they fix the cat so they don't reproduce and create a lot of kittens to ruin an environment. And that means the population is controlled and it doesn't cause an infestation. But let's get back to the cane toad. When you introduce a new creature to an environment, it could adapt very well and not hurt the ecosystem, like the honeybee. But the cane toad has entered an environment where it doesn't have any enemies. When you have a creature that doesn't have an enemy and it could reproduce very easily like this, it could take over the entire area. And when this happens, this is what you call an infestation. Let's get to know the toad itself. On the shoulders of this frog, you can find 2 sacs that's filled with venom. When the cane toad sees a threat or it feels threatened, it lets out a white pus out of the shoulders, and any animal that touches it, licks it, or gets close to it, it could be infected with it. When the poison enters certain animals' bodies, it starts attacking its cells and destroying it. And while it's doing that, it's slowly making its way to the heart. And then eventually, after a few minutes, it reaches the heart. And when it reaches the heart, that's when the story is gonna be over, because it will damage the heart and cause a failure. Like in Latin America, where this toad lives naturally, it has plenty of enemies. The biggest enemy it has is this crocodile looking thing, but its real name is the broad-snouted caiman. The venom that comes out of this toad has no effect on this caiman because this animal evolved with this toad living around it, so it doesn't affect it whatsoever. Unlike Australian animals that didn't live with this toad for millions of years, they just got to know him 90 years ago, so obviously they're gonna die. Australian experts all of a sudden realize that 77% of their freshwater crocodiles have been killed off, and it's all because of the cane toad. That's insane for a tiny toad to kill an animal like this, especially 77% of them. Either way, the experts can't get too bummed out because the evolution is gonna go on either way. Just wait a couple million years, and finally, these animals could adapt and not get killed by this. But obviously that's a joke because evolution takes a very long time. The toad is not the problem only. Another problem is the eggs it drops off. These eggs that are dropped off pretty much everywhere it goes have the same venom it has in its shoulder. So any creature that sees these eggs and gets hungry and wants to eat them, they're gonna eat a whole lot of poison and get killed the same way they do if they touch this toad. This is another reason that the population of the cane toad has grown exponentially. It drops off the eggs and basically eliminates anything that lives within this vicinity. And that means there's nothing that could kill these eggs, so most of them are born into the world. And that means many more frogs are added to their population. While in South America, there's a bunch of animals that have adapted to eating these eggs, so a very tiny amount of them are actually born into the real world. Another huge problem with this cane toad is that it conquers and it moves forward. It doesn't just stand still. They introduced it to the east coast of Australia, and look at this map and how much it has moved forward towards west. The most insane part is that this toad moves 50 kilometers a year towards the west of Australia, and that is insane. And you can't find any other animal that conquers this much land each year. Their population has been so large that they don't even show mercy to their own kind. Unlike other frogs or toads that never eat their own kind, the cane toad has started eating its own kind only in Australia. Obviously, it has been a very long time since the Australian people have been living with this toad, and most of them hate it, and whenever they see it, they want to kill it, Of course, the venom has no effect on the human body. It doesn't kill it, it just irritates your skin if you touch it. The people of Australia have been killing these toads since the 1970s, but if you kill a whole lot of them, it doesn't make a difference because plenty of more are being born. The only hope the experts have is the scientists. Scientists to figure out how to get rid of these bastards. They're trying to genetically modify these toads, where anything that's born, it becomes a male. So slowly it cannot reproduce. Of course, the people are not a fan because every time these scientists or experts have touched the ecosystem, they have ruined it even more. Either way, they have made plenty of mistakes and they don't want to make the same mistakes 3 times. That is why they are moving forward very carefully. Nowadays, you hear a lot about aliens and UFOs, and they're so popular, they even speak about them in the Congress, which we've made a video on. And we haven't even come to a conclusion that they exist or not. But on Earth, we have a creature that's very similar to aliens. You don't believe me? Let's go into the ocean. Octopus, the only creature that resembles an alien more than any other creature on Earth. You can find octopus anywhere in the world. Shallow water, deep water, water with a lot of algae, and empty waters. Octopi are one of the most ancient animals on Earth, and they've been here for about 500 million years. But back then, they looked like this. They were inside a shell, but they kind of still have that unique look to them. This creature was named an ammonite, and throughout history, it evolved in different places into different looking octopi. One place it's like this, another like this, but you get the picture. The most interesting thing about an octopus is that anything that's bigger than its eyeball, it could get its body through it. That's how flexible it is. The reason this thing is so soft and it can go anywhere is because it could get hunted easily back in the day, so it had to hide itself very well. This body allows the creature to hide in any small crevice or hole it can find. Octopus can change its colors, but not as good as humans. Right here, it's turned into a coral, so it can't be seen, and when the danger is gone, it could go back to being normal. There are small sacs on an octopus body that have 3 colors: orange, yellow, and black. With the help of these 3 colors in the sac, it could play around and turn its body into different colors. The most interesting fact is that the control of this color is in the octopus's brain. Anytime it wants to change its color, it can, and it'll do it quickly. It could not only change its color, but it could change the texture and design of the color. If it feels threatened, it could literally create bumps and lumps on its body to match the environment better. Like for example, it turns itself and makes itself look like a stone or a piece of coral. When an octopi is moving at the bottom of the ocean and it's feeling unsafe, it's always changing its color to match the environment and make it harder for the predator to see it. You could say octopi are usually paranoid because they don't want to be eaten. Maybe it's because of these survival tactics that they survived for 500 million years. Scientists believe that one octopus can change its color more than 100 times per day, and that's very impressive. It also changes the texture of the color, which is the most interesting part. An octopus can change its color in 200 milliseconds, and that's the fastest in the world. Many years ago, scientists realized that an octopus sees in black and white, and they couldn't believe it. Because how does the octopus know what color it should change to match the environment? How does it know what color to turn into? Scientists did so much research, and it basically came down to this. It's not the actual eye that settles the color of the octopus. It's the sensors on its body that realizes what the color of the environment is and changes to something similar to that. There are many other animals that could change color, like a chameleon, but the chameleon is extremely slow compared to the octopus, and it takes a few minutes for it to change color. A chameleon changes its color with the hormone it produces, but the octopus can use its brain power to change color, which is very impressive. You can't really compare the intelligence of an octopus to any other sea creature. It's much smarter than that, and you could compare it to the intelligence of a dog. It is true that it's a very small creature in the water, but there is a smarter version of itself in the water. That octopi are very intelligent, but there is a smarter one in the waters, and it threatens it. If an octopus is living in an area with this creature and it makes a mistake, it could easily be hunted down. The dolphin, one of the smartest creatures in the world, and we've made a video on it. Dolphins love octopus, but to eat, not to become friends with. And that makes the octopus job a little bit more difficult and scary, because it has to hide from something very intelligent. And they're also very clever. If this creature wasn't paying attention, it would have been extinct a very long time ago. The suction cups you see on an octopus's body is not actually suction cups. They are mostly sensors to search the environment and see what is going on. And they report to the brain to see what is going on exactly. What color is the environment? What is going on? Is there a predator nearby? A lot of scientists say that the smartest ancient creature is an octopus. And just like we said, octopi is nearing 500 million years. This thing was living on Earth where every creature was dumb. And this creature was a professor amongst them. Dolphins are very smart, but they're new as well. They're about 48 million years old. And that's one of the other reasons that they call an octopus an alien that came down to Earth. It's very ancient, it's very unusual, and not only is it smart, it's also very clever. They did an experiment in the University of Lethbridge in Canada that surprised everybody. In a giant area where they were experimenting on octopi, they released a piece of coconut shell into the water to see what the octopus does. The octopus immediately goes up to the shell, realizes what it is, and takes it and swims away with it. When they took something scary near the octopus, he would feel threatened and hide itself inside the shell, kind of like a turtle where it hides inside its shell. Scientists realized that not only is the octopus thinking, but it's planning ahead. The reason it took the coconut shell was to be safe later on, not at that point, and that shows it could plan ahead. Another interesting and smart fact about an octopus is that it could recognize people, and it could also be very friendly and play around with you. In the beginning, it will run away from its owner or whoever is taking care of it, but once it gets to know you, it would actually play around with you like a dog. This is funny and strange at the same time, because it's usually different mammals that are very friendly and like to play around with other mammals like dogs. An octopus has nothing to do with a mammal, and most importantly, it lives by itself. It doesn't socialize with its own kind either. You might say, what about a dolphin? That's a sea creature. Why does it socialize so much? A dolphin is a mammal. It even plays ball with humans. But an octopus is nothing like a mammal. It doesn't even relate to a fish whatsoever. It's its own kind. Why did mammals get smarter anyway? The theory suggests that mammals are mostly social creatures, and because they wanted to work better with one another, they started to become more intelligent throughout the years. You could also relate this to ancient humans, but you can't say the same thing about octopi. It doesn't even have social interaction with other octopi, but its intelligence is almost perfect for what it is in the ocean. And this is another reason they say octopi came from outer space. Maybe a UFO crashed into the seas 500 million years ago, and left its pet octopus in the water and just flew out of there without realizing. But obviously that was a joke, but that would make for a great movie, right? The theory suggests that humans, because of social interaction, they got more intelligent. But octopi wanted to stay alive, and that is why they got smarter. They always thought of new ways to stay alive, and maybe that's why they got smarter. Sharks are also ancient. Why didn't they eradicate octopi in the water? Even though a shark is very strong and has sharp teeth, it's very dumb. And on the other side, the octopi had intelligence, and it could run away and escape from this thing. But eventually, the octopi's luck ran out because humans caught an octopus and realized they actually really like the taste, because you can find octopus everywhere and eat it. Obviously, catching octopus is much more difficult than fish, and that is why it's more expensive. And it's very illegal in certain areas, especially the Mediterranean Sea. But the rest of it is up to you. What do you guys think? There are a lot of different types of birds that hunt, but they hunt in different ways. One of the most important birds that hunt are vultures. You might say vultures don't really hunt, but they actually do. They hunt corpse. Between all the birds and animals in the world, the nickname that was given to the vulture is the hero of the ecosystem. But why is the vulture considered a hero between everything else? Because it has one of the most important jobs in the ecosystem. Vulture is a very cool looking bird. Even though it doesn't look badass like an eagle, it still has proper stature. The most important fact about a vulture is that it has the strongest immune system compared to other birds and animals. There is a certain group of animals called scavengers. And what it means to be a scavenger is that the animal looks for dead flesh to eat rather than hunt. There are plenty of animals that are scavengers. Between all the birds, the most famous one are vultures, crows, and seagulls. Between mammals, you have hyenas, raccoon, and fox. You can find scavengers in the seas as well, like crabs and lobster. A lot of these scavengers aren't forced to eat on dead flesh because they can actually hunt for their food, like hyenas or crows. Hyenas are scavengers, but they usually try to hunt down a fresh animal. If it doesn't find food, it will start eating on dead flesh, and it has a strong immune system, so rotten flesh doesn't affect it. If a hyena doesn't actually hunt and eat rotten flesh for a very long time, it doesn't get the certain nutrition it needs and loses a lot of energy. And when you lose energy in the wild, you will probably get hunted down and eliminated. In this case, the vulture is completely different because it only wants rotten flesh or dead flesh. And that is exactly why it's a hero amongst other animals. You could kind of consider it the garbage man of nature. Not only do these natural vacuums clean the environment, they also get rid of the disease and bacteria in that area. A vulture is so well known around the world that when you refer to something as scavenger, it automatically refers to a vulture because it's the most famous one. When you go to Google and search scavenger, most of the photos you're gonna see are from vultures. Inside the stomach of the vulture, you will find a certain acid that you could compare to volcanic material inside the volcano. And any bacteria, disease, or food that's inserted, it will get burned up and eliminated. So it doesn't allow the bacteria it consumes to exit its body. When the animal dies in nature, usually the first scavenger to find it is a vulture or a group of vultures. The other ones show up later. The vulture has a very strong vision It flies high and it's constantly scanning the ground. You could compare it to the SR-71 but without the speed. Like for example, if you find a dead flesh that a hyena is eating, just be sure that a vulture has found this first, ate a bunch of it and left, and the hyena eats the rest. All around the world, there are 23 different types of vultures, and in each location, they are much different from one another. 7 of these vultures are endangered. In the year 1990, scientists realized that the population of vultures are heavily declining, and the weirdest part is that it was only vultures that were dying, not anything else. After plenty of research, they realized that these vultures are being poisoned. In southern Asia, 90% of the vulture population died in a span of 4 years. Scientists realized that these vultures were eating flesh that had a certain type of drug in it, a drug called diclofenac. This is an anti-inflammatory drug for pigs and cows, but it's poison for vultures. So pigs and cows are fed to vultures. Rest of the world they don't, but in India, since the cow is sacred and they don't eat pig, they have a natural life and naturally die. So when they die, the vultures eat them. So most of these vultures died because of this anti-inflammatory drug. And that is why since 2006, it has been outlawed in Pakistan, India, and Nepal. So these useful birds don't go extinct. Vultures can easily go extinct because to multiply their population, it's extremely difficult. Like for example, each female vulture might lay 2 eggs per year, and that's nothing compared to other birds. So let's say in southern Asia, the vulture goes extinct. Who cares? There are other scavengers to take care of the rotten flesh. Yes, those scavengers can do that job, but the vulture does something that's much more important, something that other scavengers can't do. The vulture keeps the ecosystem balanced. But how is that? It doesn't allow the population of a scavenger like the hyena to skyrocket. It finds the food before the hyena and eats most of it, and this doesn't allow the hyena to thrive in population. The weak ones, or the ones that are extra, will die off because of this. And this is very important because it keeps the ecosystem very balanced. In an area that has too many hyenas because of a lack of vulture, it ruins the ecosystem and it puts other animals' life in danger. The most important thing vultures have is that the acid on their stomach gets rid of the bacteria and the disease of the flesh. But when a hyena eats something that's rotten, it doesn't get rid of 100% of the bacteria, and some of it is left over in its feces. Everybody knows how a vulture looks because it's very iconic. It has a bald head that's furless and hairless, and they're pretty giant for what they are. But why are they bald? That's because it allows the bacteria and the diseases to not stick to the fur of its head, and it could be easily cleaned. But what about its legs? Because it's always in contact with rotten flesh. This animal has a solution for its feet as well. It's called urine, and unlike anybody else's urine where it has a lot of bacteria, the urine is actually a bacteria killer and it cleans the feet. And this is another mechanism that it helps to stay clean. You can find windmills everywhere. The number one killer for vultures are these windmills, because when a vulture is flying, it doesn't look straight. It looks down, left, and right for food. So that is why they always crash into windmills and get killed. Vultures were always hated throughout history, and nobody considered them important because they thought they were dirty and they spread diseases around. A belief that's completely 180 degrees because it does the opposite of that. It eliminates the disease and bacteria in the whole environment. Nowadays, most governments know that how important this bird is, and they're helping keep them safe and help them not go extinct. Their mating takes a very long time, and to regrow their population, it will take an extremely long time. Like for example, in Kenya, there's a bad belief that says vultures bring a lot of diseases to the environment, and that is why they poison a lot of animals in Kenya. And after that, the vultures start eating them and dying as well because of that. The vulture is a type of bird that could puke on demand, and this is the only defense mechanism it has. Anything that wants to attack it, it will puke towards it and fly away. You've most likely watched our video about the little girl and the vulture. The vulture is sitting down and it's waiting to eat this child. Do you think if the photographer wasn't around, the vulture would eat this child? Until it wasn't sure that it's not moving or doesn't have the power to choke it out, it won't attack or go forward. But if it realizes the child has no energy and it can't fight back, it will start eating them. And it will start eating while the human is still alive. You see a lot of movies and videos that vultures fly around in a circle. Is there a dead body down there where these guys are waiting for it to die so they can land and start eating? There's a chance that it could be, or there couldn't. When vultures get tired, this is one of their ways they can rest. Since they have giant wings, they just open it up and start flying in a circle, and that's how they rest. This is their form of a break. But there's a chance there could be a dead body down there that they're waiting for it to die so they can land. What is the lifespan of vultures anyways? It all depends on the type of vulture around the world. An average age for a vulture is about 10 years old. But when you talk about the king vulture that is only found in this area of the world, meaning Latin America, it can last up to 30 years. Can you domesticate a vulture? No, you cannot. If you gain its trust, it won't attack you, but it can't be like a pet where you can train it and give it tricks. I knew vultures are very good for nature, but not to this extent, because a lot of people around the world truly believe that this is an evil animal that only does bad things. And I hope this video helped you guys out to understand this animal a little bit better. On this planet, we have a place that's considered the most dangerous place in the world just because of the animals. And you might be able to guess it. Australia. We've made plenty of videos about Australia's wildlife, but we've never made a video about this creature, the most venomous snake in the world. The inland taipan. Everybody knows the cobra because they're plentiful, especially in India. If you don't extract the venom from a cobra, it could be extremely dangerous, and with one bite, you can go bye-bye. But that's if you don't go to the hospital to receive the care you need. But when the cobra hears the name inland taipan, it goes back into the basket because the competition is not even close. The venom inside the taipan is 23 times more potent than the cobra. When the cobra bites its prey, it puts an insane amount of venom inside the person's body, around 420 milligrams. With this much venom, you could kill 2,600 mice. But the inland taipan venom has a lot more than that, and it doesn't extract that much venom, only 44 milligrams each bite. But with this very low amount of venom that's extracted from its mouth, it could kill 220,000 mice. The amount of venom is 1/10 of the cobra, but it's 100 times more deadly. You see this red color inside the center of Australia? This is where you can find the inland taipan. If you ever consider going to Australia, just avoid these sections because the chance of confronting this creature is quite high. If someone is not careful and is bitten by the inland taipan, what will happen? If you get to the hospital quickly, they have the anti-venom that could save your life. But the time is the most important part. In 45 minutes, this venom will kill you. Let's say we get to the hospital in under 45 minutes and we receive the anti-venom. Is everything gonna be okay? You will most likely live, but living comfortably is not guaranteed, because this venom, if it enters your body, it does a lot of damage, and sometimes those damages could be permanent. But let's get to know the inland taipan a little bit better and realize how it evolved to be this dangerous. Scientists haven't been able to figure out why snakes evolved this way and why some of them have venom. Scientists know that ancient snakes like the titana boa had power and they were not venomous, so they would use their strength to strangle their prey and eat them. But the more we move forward, the weaker these snakes get and more dangerous in terms of venom. In ancient times, most snakes lived in jungles, so they can hide between bushes and trees and wait for their prey to show up so they can attack. But when we get to around 20 million years ago, most of these jungles started to turn into savannas, and that means it's open area where this snake can no longer hide. Giant snakes could not stay alive in places like this anymore because they were so giant they couldn't chase the prey, and they were so big they couldn't hide either, and this would cause them to not be able to eat and basically go extinct. In simple terms, the snakes lost their size and strength, but in return they received venom because they were lacking an attack weapon now. And of course, all of this takes millions of years. When you compare venoms from different snakes from around the world, each of them have different types of chemicals and toxin that make it up. And that means each snake in its own environment evolved differently, and it evolved in a way where it was most effective towards the prey that was available in the area. The favorite food of venomous snakes around the world are small mammals. But the place the inland taipan lives, it's very brutal, hot, dry, and there's barely any greens. And unlike other places, you can barely find food. Scientists have a theory that maybe the inland taipan has such a dangerous venom is because food is so scarce that if it actually attacks a prey, they want them to for sure die. So they didn't want a chance for the prey to escape whatsoever. When an inland taipan attacks its prey, it tries to bite them more than one time because it wants to make sure it dies rather than escape, even though the first bite would have killed them anyways. So when the venom enters a body, what does it do? First and foremost, it releases enzymes that cause inflammation, and another enzyme that causes your blood to clot so it doesn't flow freely. The way the blood clot works is that it doesn't allow blood to go into your muscles, and you could say it kind of causes paralysis. And that is why when some people receive the anti-venom, they could never be the same because it has done permanent damage to their body parts. When the venom enters the body, the first and foremost goal is the kidney, and anything in the way, it gets damaged. And it has happened plenty of times that people have received the anti-venom after being bitten and they still experience kidney failure. The most important food this snake eats is mice, and when it actually bites some mice, it instantly paralyzes them from the neck down. And that means the mice is still alive and it could see everything, but it can't move. And that is why the snake is probably eating it alive. Scientists say the number one chemical inside the inland taipan venom is paradoxin, which is not venomous by itself, but rather it has so many different types of chemicals inside it that makes it a super venom. It seems like inside the body of the taipan, there's an evil scientist trying to create the most toxic venom known to man. Nature is fascinating, and it's also terrifying. And nowadays the world is small, and thanks to the internet, most people know what is going on around the world and are familiar with an animal like this. And now we realize in the center of Australia what is happening and what type of a dangerous animal lives there. A snake like this could kill 220,000 mice with only 44 milligrams of venom. Old war factories that were creating dangerous chemicals to kill people can't even create such dangerous venom. So that is the reason the venom of these snakes are very rare and extremely expensive. Like for example, the cobra venom, which is plentiful especially in India, is $150 per gram. But the inland taipan venom cannot be sold to just anybody. Only Australia has it, and they sell it to laboratories only for experiments and testing, and the price of it is around $10,000 a gram. It is still not the most expensive venom in the world. The most expensive venom belongs to this creature, a scorpion called the death stalker. Each gram of this venom costs $11,000. You have to know that around the world you can find scorpion farms that are only made for their venom. You can find them for snakes, but they're mostly for scorpions. Like what you're seeing is a facility that farms venom from scorpions. What is this venom used for anyway? All around the world, there are certain scientists and laboratories that would love these venoms only for testing and experimenting. But there are pharmaceutical companies that also buy these venoms to put in different drugs. Like for example, Stanford University has their own scorpion farm so they can get the venom for their own scientists to study. One example is that in drugs that are meant for arthritis, you might be able to find venom from scorpion because it has painkiller agents. There are farms for snake venom as well, but not as common, and you could find them in different drugs. Like some venoms from snakes are meant to lower blood pressure, so you can see them in blood pressure medication. But the number one customer for these venoms are laboratories that are meant for testing and experimenting, so they can figure out what else they can use it for. All around the world, you could also find experts that catch these venomous snakes and grab their venom and go sell them. But you have to be extremely experienced to handle a venomous snake like this in the wild, so we don't recommend it. This is a T-Rex, and it went extinct around 65 million years ago with an asteroid. But it comes back in a much smaller form, a creature we all know and love. Something we call chickens or roosters. These domesticated birds that can't fly weren't always like this. Just like animals that were domesticated by humans, like cows and sheep, chickens were the same. Not all chickens are domesticated though, because you can go in different parts of the world and find wild chickens and roosters. If you see a wild rooster, they will for sure attack you because they're very angry creatures. Even a domesticated rooster is angry and wants to fight you, but not as bad as a wild one. Scientists don't really know how in human history the chicken was domesticated, but they guess that it most likely happened in southern China around 8,000 years ago. And they estimate that it was most likely this chicken that they domesticated, the red jungle fowl. There are other theories that suggest that domesticating chickens and roosters actually happened in the Indian peninsula, and the chicken they domesticated is the gray jungle fowl. There are also other historians that say that it was ancient Egypt that was able to domesticate these chickens, but you really can't pinpoint the exact location. You're probably familiar with Polynesia. We've made a few videos about them. They basically took over all the islands in the Pacific Ocean, and it's interesting because they take the rooster and chicken from Asia to those islands, and that is why even though in North America and South America there are no chickens, you can find these chickens in these islands. There is a theory that says the Chinese first domesticated the rooster, then the hen, because they wanted the rooster for cockfighting. But if you want to see who did it and show proof through art and statues, it was the Romans and the Greeks, and they had mosaics of it because they were huge fans of this sport. Right now in most countries it is illegal to do cockfighting, but even though it's illegal in a lot of countries, they still do it around the world, and that is why it's still known as one of the oldest sports in the world. But let's leave cockfighting alone. It very quickly became that it was very important to have chickens around as humans, and not only was its meat special, it also laid eggs, and that was very important as well. Right now chickens are very domesticated. They can't even fly, they don't fight each other, and you could transport them very easily. The rooster is very feisty if you get it angry, but it's still domesticated. Do you see this drawing? It's a very old drawing done by Aristotle, a Greek philosopher from 2300 years ago. He basically speaks about how Egyptians are so advanced that they have farms just for eggs. He also continues and says, the Egyptians have been doing this for thousands of years, and we are just getting familiar with it. The Egyptians also had a secret. They knew that the chickens do not lay eggs in the winter or when it's cold, so they would permanently make this environment hot so the chicken would think it's summer and it's time to lay eggs. Aristotle doesn't really realize how the Egyptians keep this area warm, and when he asks them, they don't give up on the secret. This secret stays in place for more than 2,000 years. This is when the French get to Egypt and they're trying to dissect the history of this ancient civilization, and one of the things they see is how they farm eggs from chickens. They realize that there are types of furnaces underneath the building and they're lit up with wood, and there was always a person to keep adding wood to it so the fire stays put and the place stays warm. A chicken farm like this wasn't even in France in that year, so they finally realize how it's done, and they take this ancient technology to France so they can have access to eggs throughout the year. But it's interesting to note that they are not successful because France is much colder than Egypt, and creating a technology and a farm like this was not possible with firewood. So about 100 years after this, it finally was able to happen because of the discovery of coal, and it was able to get hot enough to keep a room that warm. During the dark ages of Europe, people weren't able to buy meat. Don't even think about pigs or cows or sheep, and even chicken. If they had a little bit of money for meat, the only thing they could afford was chicken, because the red meat was only for kings and wealthy people. A story like this does not work in the Middle East. There was plenty of meat to go around, and that is why when you look at the height of medieval Europe, they are much shorter than the people of Middle East. And one of the main reasons was the lack of protein for the Europeans, and there wasn't enough nutrients in their food compared to West Asia. Like for example, Vikings ate a lot of meat. They went fishing, they ate northern deers, and a lot of other sources of meat, so they were ginormous because of their diet. But when you go to China and East Asia, once again you're confronted with meat shortage, so the heights go down and down again. Throughout history, chicken was always the cheapest source of meat, and since it was the cheapest, everybody loved it. And when you look at it through every culture of the world, there is a thing about roosters and chickens, especially roosters. In a Persian religion of Zoroastrianism, when a rooster sings in the morning, it's the edge of darkness and light, and it's trying to get rid of the demons. In Islam, it says when you hear a rooster singing in the morning, thank God because you were able to see an angel. In Christianity, the rooster is much more special. Some say that roosters are a symbol of Jesus Christ. If you look at medieval buildings of Europe, sometimes you'll see a rooster on top. And the reason for this rooster that remains to this day is because of Pope Nicholas I that came into power. He said to the people that not only should we have crosses on our buildings, we should all have a rooster. And that is why since then, you see roosters and crosses on top of ancient buildings. As much as rooster is so special in everybody's culture, but in Western culture, chickens are not that special. They're actually scared animals, and when you call someone a chicken, you're basically telling them that they're scared. But this is only seen in Western culture, not anybody else's. But let's stop talking about symbolism and talk about chicken itself. It is the most important meat source in the world, and every culture, country, religion has their own type of dish with this meat. And something that makes it even more special is the egg it drops, something else that's very nutritious. In different countries, you can find thousands of different dishes that have a lot of chicken in them. And on the other side, there's a lot of different cultures and countries that have dishes with eggs inside. So how many chickens are consumed by humans every day? You might not believe it, but each day, more than 60 million chickens are eaten by humans. That's absurd. But the statistics for eggs should surprise you more. The amount of eggs consumed by one person on Earth is 161 per year. So when you calculate how many eggs one person consumes on average, it's 161. But when you add it together, that means more than 3.5 billion eggs are eaten per day. Before World War I, everywhere in the world, chicken farmings happened in villages, and there really wasn't technology behind it or an industry. But after the Great War, the Americans realized that the chicken is very important for food, not only the meat, also the eggs. So they started working towards better technology and farming these little animals more efficiently. If you want to see how chicken industry works and how efficient it is, and how brutal it is sometimes, there are plenty of videos on YouTube. Even though the quality of meat has gotten down because of this industry, but it's still amazing how it works and how cheap it has kept chicken prices. It would have been much more expensive, and that would apply to red meats as well. Chicken is very nutritious, even the non-organic version. Chicken has plenty of proteins. It makes you full. It's not like processed meats or sugar that's terrible for you, and it's highly nutritious. Don't even get me started on how good eggs are. There are a lot of rumors that the yolks are bad for you, the egg whites are better, but that was all BS because everything is great about it. There are athletes that only eat eggs, which is insane. Like there are bodybuilders that eat 40 boiled eggs per day, and it doesn't affect them negatively whatsoever. Their liver is fine, their intestines are fine, and it doesn't make them lack performance whatsoever. The industry was not great for the male version of chicken, which is the rooster. If you've seen how the industry works, you'll see that each male chicken is killed when it's a baby because it's not worth feeding it and making it grown up just for the meat. So this animal was the most important meat for humans for 8,000 years, and it's still the same to this day, and it's gonna be in the future because you really can't think of anything that could replace it. The animal that would make noise and it would scare every animal in the 10-mile vicinity has turned into a very lovely chicken that we all know and love. We make them eat so we can eat them in return. This bird is called a bee eater because it eats all types of insects. This is the nest it stays in, and inside of there, they have eggs, and they keep it warm until the eggs hatch. But this is when a con artist is doing its job, because one of these eggs do not belong to the bee eater, an egg that's gonna hatch much before the other one. The sad part is right here. When the first baby is born, even though it cannot visually see anything, it's embedded in its genetics to destroy every egg around them, usually with its beak. For the bee eater bird, it thinks that this chick belongs to them, even though every other chick has been killed or dropped off and there's only one remaining. They still think it's legit, so it still feeds it. The bee eater stays busy all day and night so it can find food for its newborn that does not belong to him. A story like this does not happen once in a while. Everywhere there are different types of birds that do this. For a bird that does this, they're called broad parasites, and they're basically counted as parasites for doing such thing. What we just told you is a complete strategy that has been planned out for millions of years. And for an animal like this bird that is not that smart, to pull off a plan like this, it's insane. There are a lot of broad parasites in the world that drop their eggs off somewhere they don't belong. But in this video, we want to talk about one of the most famous broad parasites, the one everybody knows and loves. This one, the cuckoo bird. Before we talk about the cuckoo bird, we have to say one thing. We have other types of birds, mainly ducks, that rent out other birds' nests. They are not considered broad parasites, but they do borrow the other bird's nest. And once the duck chick hatches, it does not stay there to get fed by the unknown mother. It actually escapes the nest and tries to find its mother based on the smell. So in this case, they're not really stealing or killing other babies. They're just borrowing a spot for a little while until they're born and they go back to their home. This is the reason that the ducks that do this are not considered broad parasites. It is true that it does not pay rent for borrowing a spot, but it does not kill the other chicks and it doesn't ask for food. But let's get back to the cuckoo bird. Compared to other broad parasites, the cuckoo bird is much more advanced and popular, so evolution has really made its job easier. When other broad parasites drop their eggs off somewhere, their eggs are completely different from one another. So that is why the host of the nest could quickly realize that that one egg does not belong in this nest. And when they figured that out, they actually destroy it. They either drop it off or throw it out of the nest. But the cuckoo bird egg kind of fools every other bird because it could be similar to the other birds in that environment and they can't figure out which is which. Normally, the cuckoo bird egg hatches before every other chick, and once the cuckoo chick has been born, it does not destroy the other eggs in the nest with its beak. It rather throws it off the nest, and when you throw eggs off the nest, they either break, and even if it does not break, the mother will not go down there to get it because it's considered lost or killed. This is when the cuckoo bird becomes the only child of the nest. Compared to other birds, cuckoos are actually pretty big. They're around 60 to 80 centimeters. So in this case, it's very common for you to see a very young cuckoo bird in a nest getting fed by a much smaller host. And this image is very funny to see. Even though the baby size is more than double them, they still don't realize that it doesn't belong to them. Day and night they work so they can fit this big bird. I mean, just look how engineered and strategic the planning is, and how beautifully the birds execute it. The key factor in this strategy is that the cuckoo bird has to be born before every other egg in that nest. And if it's not, the plan is not going to work. So when it's born or it hatches, it doesn't have plenty of time. It has to get rid of the other eggs quickly. The reason for that is if the other eggs hatch at the same time or before him, the host of the nest could quickly realize that this bird does not belong here, just based on the sounds of the chicks. And once it realizes that the bird doesn't belong, it kills the baby or it throws it off the nest. But just like we said, the cuckoo bird is more clever than that, and it doesn't let it get to this point. But we have a question here. What does the cuckoo bird do when it grows up? Does it go back to its parents? Not really, because all this we're telling you is hardwired in its genetics, and it automatically knows exactly what to do for the plan to work well. It exactly knows how to be a proper brood parasite and where to plant the eggs, so the generation continues. The interesting part is that the cuckoo bird does not release its egg quickly. It actually hoards it longer than any other bird, so it can incubate inside its body, and once it's dropped off, it could make sure that that egg is gonna hatch before every other egg in that nest, so the plans work. The cuckoo bird is also the most active brood parasite, because throughout the year, it plants 12 to 22 eggs in different nests. And it's so successful that the success rate is actually higher than you think, and more survive rather than die. Where can you find the cuckoo bird in the world? You can find them pretty much everywhere because they are on every continent. The cuckoo birds love to migrate around the world. During the spring and summer era, they're in the northern part of the world. And once it starts to get cold after summer, they start heading south towards the warmer areas. Then when it gets warmer again, they go up north again. What we're trying to say is that no bird is safe from the cuckoo bird because you can find them everywhere. They enslave other birds. Not only do they not pay them, they also kill their chicks. In the 1950s, when European scientists were identifying different species and organisms, the British got familiar with this type of bird that never had a name before. So they decided to name it cuckoo. And the reason for this name is that when it speaks, it sounds like this. This noise only comes out of the male cuckoo bird, and it only does it when it's looking for a mate. It's basically telling the female cuckoo, let's go make some babies, and you don't have to do anything about it. We can have other birds raise our kids. You might say, we live in these purple areas, but we've never seen this bird. That's because you might live in a crowded city, somewhere that the cuckoo bird hates and it stays away from. Another interesting fact about this bird is that the noise it makes is considered good luck. And not just in Europe, but you can find it in South Asia, like India, all the way to Indonesia. And the reason they say that, when you hear it, it brings good luck because it's so rare. Basically, all around the world, when you hear a unique, beautiful noise, it brings you happiness, so it's understandable for people to have these types of beliefs. But you can't trust this sound, because this bird is a con artist, and it enslaves and kills chicks. What do you guys think? I just need... Millions of years ago, there was an animal on Earth that every living thing was terrified of. When it moved, it made the ground shake. But there was one creature that wasn't afraid of it: the fly. Flies have been around planet Earth for a very long time, around 240 million years ago to be exact, and they have no intentions of going extinct. One of the best forms of fossil that shows ancient insects, especially flies, is amber, which we've made a video about. In the last 240 million years that these flies have lived all over the globe, they have turned into different shapes and sizes everywhere they live, and humans have yet to figure out how many flies we have around the world. There are thousands of different flies that look mildly different from one another, but they are all around the same type of insect. But the ones that you and I are familiar with is one type of fly, and it's called the housefly. The average size of these flies is around 6 to 7 millimeters, so not too large. And if you would like to know the difference between the male and female ones, the female ones are fatter and shorter, but the male ones are skinnier and taller. And the main reason the female ones are fatter is because they carry the eggs, and they usually have a lot of eggs inside them at any given time. The most interesting part of a fly's body is its eyes, and the type of eyes is called the compound eye. You can only find this type of eye on insects, like dragonflies, bees, and of course flies. And if you're interested, we have made a video about dragonflies as well. Unlike the human eye, a compound eye has thousands of different lenses, and even though the resolution or the quality of the eye is not that clear, but it's extremely fast and it notices a difference in color, movement, quicker than any other eye. And that is why with the slightest movement around it, it notices it and escapes. And that's why it's very hard to kill it with a fly swatter. The fly has so many lenses in its compound eye that what you and I see is gonna seem slow motion to this insect. So that's why its reaction time is tremendously fast. Alongside other insects like dragonflies and bees, flies have the fastest ones out of all of them. This insect loves eating liquid because it cannot eat solid. When it's sitting on top of something that looks solid to you and I, it's pretty much sucking up all the liquid of that food. It doesn't have teeth to chew, and there's nothing solid that could fit in its mouth. So its mouth has a straw that sucks anything. How do humans taste food? It's with the help of our nose and our tongues, which are called taste buds. But a fly is completely different because its taste buds are located on its feet. When it lands anywhere, it starts tasting with its feet and realizes if it's worth to stay or not. All living things like their own type of food. Like humans tend to love meat. Lions like zebra meat. Snakes like to eat rats. But flies love sugar. It's not just powdered sugar. Anything that has sugar inside it and it's in a form of liquid, the fly goes crazy for it. Even a damaged piece of fruit, you could see flies flying around it and trying to eat it. You've probably seen clips of different flies rubbing their hands together when they've landed somewhere. It seems like they're thinking about an evil plan, but the reason they do this is to clean their hands so their taste buds that is located on their feet and hands can work better and detect the taste better. You've probably seen a fly walk around on the ceiling without even falling. But how is this possible? If you look at its feet underneath the microscope, this is how it looks like. It has two tiny claws, and these claws are so small and tiny, and the fly weighs so little that when it lands on the ceiling, it digs into the ceiling a little bit and it could stay there and walk around. The fly has an actual long lifespan. It lasts 28 days. You might say that's not long, but for an insect, that's pretty long. A female fly throughout its life lays 500 eggs. So it tries to drop as many as possible and then die. But where do they lay these eggs? It lays it in a very special place, on top of animal feces, very disgusting areas, rotten food, rotten dead flesh, and other disgusting things. If that area is disgusting enough, the eggs are going to survive and they're going to be fully born and they could be full adults. But if it's not, they will die. So can it lay eggs in a cleaner area? No, because the eggs that are being laid and when they're eventually going to be born, they're gonna need a food source. And these kids do not have a mother or father watching over them anymore. So they have to survive on their own. And if there's not a food supply when they're born, they will not survive. So if you have a very clean environment around you, you're most likely not gonna see a lot of flies. This insect is actually very durable, but as long as the weather is warm, its biggest enemy is cold weather, and it cannot do anything, not even fly. Also, its eggs do not hatch in the cold weather. Like in an environment where it's 35 degrees Celsius, the eggs can be born as little as 2 days. But if you're in an environment where it's 14 degrees Celsius, the chances of the babies being born is quite low. And if they actually do become being born, it takes more than 30 days. So the most important thing for this insect is hot weather, especially hot and dry. Like the Middle East, North Africa, west of the US. But the highest density of flies you can find is in Australia because there's a lot of hot, dry places in this continent. But it's not mainly in the areas people live. If you closely pay attention to a fly, you realize how much of a disgusting insect it is. Since it only consumes liquid, it's always leaving feces around. So whenever it lands, it actually drops feces, even though you cannot see it physically. And it is because of this reason that it could pass around bacteria and virus everywhere quickly. It sits on a feces of an animal, picks up the bacteria, then it goes lands on somebody's food, leaves its feces, and somebody eats it and gets that bacteria. The chances of a fly carrying a bacteria and a virus is quite high. It's always hanging around disgusting areas. So what's the point of living for this insect? When a female fly is born, it only has one goal: to drop as many eggs as possible, and its entire goal is to leave as many as its own kind before dying. When it leaves that many eggs, it can leave in peace. On the other side, the male fly is only looking for mates so they can fertilize their eggs. So the life of a fly is basically produce as many as themselves as possible, then die. How big and small are flies? There are plenty of different sizes, but this is one of the biggest ones. A fly called the horsefly or tabanidae. This could be as big as 25 millimeters, around 4 times the housefly. And anywhere the horsefly goes, you could hear it from afar away. It has such loud wings that it shows itself quickly. The life of a horsefly or tabanidae is not that different from a housefly. It always hangs around disgusting areas. The second largest one is this type of fly, called the flesh fly. The flesh fly could be as big as 23 millimeters, so it's not that small. The other ones like juice. This one likes flesh, but not the flesh itself. It likes the juice of the meat that drops around it. That might be one of the reasons it's larger, because it's getting a lot of protein. Are flies dangerous? They're mostly dangerous because they're usually carrying bacteria and viruses. But we have a type of fly that is very dangerous, the tsetse fly, that could only be found in this area, Central Africa. The tsetse fly sucks the blood of its prey, and instead of saying thank you, it leaves a parasite in that person or animal's body. A parasite that could cause fevers, headaches, muscle ache, and finally, it could make you very sleepy. If you don't get the care you need immediately, it could cause a person to die. But unfortunately, the tsetse fly is in a location where people don't have proper access to medical care. So a lot of people that get stung by this fly will die. So we only said bad things. Is there anything good about flies? Even though it's a disgusting insect, there are good things. First of all, it's a type of pollinator. And the other one is that by eating a lot of bacterias, it controls its own population, kind of like vultures, which we've made a video on. I would have never thought that flies could do something useful on planet Earth, but the negatives are much higher than the positives. So theoretically, if it's no longer around, it's not gonna damage anything. But either way, we are forced to live with them. We have to keep our environment clean, and the chances of confronting a fly is much lower in an area like that. But if you live in a cold area, you won't have to deal with these little insects.